And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have three of my good brothers and sisters. We have our resident observer and librarian, good brother Theo.
Hello.
We have our resident demon mommy, good sister Riona.
Good afternoon, all you dear and lovely people.
And the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zidare Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Zidare Enterprises would like to remind the monk that you fucking forgot Matt.
That's true, I did.
He was getting to that.
Yes.
Yes, he was getting to Matt.
Yeah, and yes, the memory slot, the man called Matt.
Howdy.
So this
It's all good.
is
I'll let it slide this time.
yeah. This is a special. Obviously, this is something that I have been building up for the last month. That we would be doing a Q&A in regards to Legend Edition, which is in, I guess we could call it the home stretch at this point in time.
Yeah, we're down to we got the formatting run out of the way. That was fun, wasn't it, Matt? It was great. Great stuff. For those of you unaware, Matt is one of the people who has been helping me with editing, and he's also the guy that's been doing the entire bestiary, that which is also an undertaking. He designed the character keeper and party tracker as well. We have another helper, Miss Naminomi, but she is not here today due to her own just exhaustion. So she's here in spirit at least.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, final stretches. I'm doing rewrite editing, and that's also a thing. The fun of being editor-in-chief, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Positively floor-mated.
Oh,
by
the finishing
hard work
touches
that
have
went into
been
the formatting.
quite exhaustive, but I think it's all going towards a really good end product. So I'm really happy with the work we've done.
I'm really happy with the work, and thank you very much, Riona, for the compliment on formatting. I can't wait to see how that formatting translates to the layouts that Nami and Matt have been designing for the PDF. I have a feeling that this book is going to pop, and it's going to do it really well.
Mm-hmm. And who'd we lose?
I don't think we lost anyone.
No.
Somebody brought up the
I
screen
just-
so they could hear Riona.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it's all in my head, but apparently not.
No, it's not all in your head. Don't worry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in your walls.
Really?
That's,
Come out. We can. If you're in my walls, come out. We can cuddle. Come on. I will always cuddle a demon mommy. Don't worry.
If you're in my walls, don't mind the dynamite, but also don't touch it.
In Minecraft.
In Minecraft, yes.
But yeah, with the forthcoming final finishing touches and translation over to the PDF in the next few months, this Q&A was, I think our opportunity to give some clarification, especially since with Matt's help, he did spread word of our project over to one of the Final Fantasy tabletop community servers, because he was originally helping with Final Fantasy 5th edition.
Mm-hmm.
No, that is not 5e as in D&D 5e. That's the 5th edition of the Final Fantasy tabletop RPG that was developed by numerous people over the years.
Yeah.
Monk's been over that history quite a lot.
If you want the skinny on some parts of that history, go watch the FF Week series of videos I did a couple years ago.
Yep.
Oh.
But once that project unfortunately fell through due to various factors, Matt was like, I know about Legend Edition. It's looked kind of cool. I've been helping with a couple things. Now I want to help with a lot more of it, which I think he has come to regret at least a little bit.
Maybe a little bit, but yeah, no. I had a bunch of stuff done for 5e, and 5e was just kind of not really going anywhere. But I had made all these assets, tons of icons for like jobs and just a bunch of stuff. And when 5e fell through, I was like, well, shit. I guess it's just all gonna go to waste. But at the time, I was already helping Mildra with the character keeper, and I'm like, well, hey, why don't I have some stat icons, I'll put them in the character keeper, I'll put this in the character keeper, and eventually I was just like, hey, what if I just, gave you all of my assets? Because I'd prefer that they go to a place where they'll actually be used than for them to just sit to the wayside forever,
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And many of the assets he has purposed or repurposed. we've gotten to put our 2 cents, sometimes our entire dollar, or one single stinking gill into. I think the small suggestions here and there have improved those assets even more, and it really helps give a visual identity that we're going to have with this game.
Yeah, to sort of give an idea for what the visual aesthetic will look like, I went over it with Nami, and our aim with the look is to draw a line somewhere between like a game manual and like the Ultimanias, like something that looks almost official, but still very much has its own unique coat of paint to it. I'm really happy with how it looks.
We've gotten some of those rough drafts, some of those ideas, little layout designs they have for the PDF that they bring to us, and every time I look at it and go, God damn, I wish I was that talented with graphic arts. But beyond that, I am eternally grateful to both of you, Matt and to Nami, that you're taking on that side of the project. And really, I think Monk and I have tooled with the engine. Now you're giving our nice Formula One car all of its nice stickers.
I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to do it. Truthfully.
Yeah, and it's certainly been a long ways coming, because like I said, this is a project that started as just a one-off idea that's expanded into something beyond that over the last 3 years. And
a one-time reconstruction turned full-on game. Yeah.
And I do remember when I talked with a few people the last time I was at Cowtown, a small-time comic convention down in the Fort Worth area. I had mentioned some of the ideas that had cropped up during my streams, and one of the people who I was talking with, who I've interviewed in the past, he was of three people who were open to doing interviews. He was one of the 2 people who actually showed up. The third one no-showed me, and never apologized. But these things happen. He had said that he had said that because of some of the ideas that go through me, I should start writing my own stories, which I've dipped in a few places here and there, but I think it was more of a confidence thing for the longest time. I mean, that's why I waited so long to even start a damn channel, even if it was 9 years ago. But with I was already a fan of the Legends system, and I thought it had a lot more potential than a lot of people gave it credit for, especially for something that was a 3.5 hack that came out of a Giant in the Playground challenge. But if you've ever seen Inception, you may recall that whole speech about how the most stubborn thing in the universe is an idea. And
yeah,
I'd say that's definitely the case. And because I brought that up, I'm pretty sure somebody's gonna are you gonna write a Inception RPG next? I'm like, no, somebody's already done that. It's called Lucid.
Yeah, touche. That's touche.
Yeah.
The dream sequel basing sad face.
I've gotten my fair share of, okay, how would you run an RPG in this with this or that setting, or this or that IP, and I'd be like, why would I need to make a brand new one if one that's doing it already exists? Like, why would I need if it weren't for the fact Go ahead.
I was gonna say, especially if the one that already exists does it well.
I'm not going to write a Digimon RPG anytime soon, because there's already a good amount that are high quality as it is.
However, we might make well, no, we won't, but like we might want somebody to make a Dark Souls RPG that is a little bit better than the official product.
I can't speak on the official product in Japan. We can speak, and we have spoken on the official product that Steamforged Games made a few years ago.
That is not a very good Dark Souls game.
And I guess they knew it because they have not touched the idea of doing a TTRPG since. They've stuck to board games.
Good.
Which, in all fairness, they do board games very well.
Yeah.
So
it's a completely different thing between a TTRPG and board game, because board games and TTRPGs have completely separate principles of how they operate. I think that I keep telling that, but the Japanese, I think, kind of got it. They separated the two genres, which, to be fair, board games are not as popular there as here, for example. Still popular, but yeah, I think so. It's cool.
well, I've seen whenever I see the whole spiel about a certain TTRPG feeling too much like a board game, I'm sitting there going, where the hell have you been? Because the two have been swapping notes with each other for decades. And I know, and in some cases I'm like, you have a bunch of index cards full, or you bought it would be very, very embarrassing if somebody who's complaining about a TTRPG using cards happened to buy a spell deck for their D&D campaign.
Yes, that would be quite something.
It's not like I haven't caught people doing just that or anything. But getting back to the heart of the matter, I will note what makes Final Fantasy and tabletop a unique affair is that unlike a lot of other projects, there's a more distinct line of succession over the past 30 years. Because everything started with the Returners project back in the mid '90s, and then expanded out with other takes. Some of them I couldn't get the exact year, and I remember that being a bit of a tricky thing with me and Matt because we were trying to because for part of 5e he wanted to establish a timeline of what video games came out around the time that the TTRPGs came out.
Right, yeah, it was this big timeline that was like every fan TRPG, and then there would be a sidebar with, here's a video game that came out when, this TRPG came out, just to give people a frame of reference.
There were 3 editions of Returners, then all of the Returners team split into their own projects. Then the Brazilians got a hold of it. Then around the same time, the Germans got a hold of it. Wonder if we'll ever find out what the hell happened to Omega.
The man's lost in the void right now.
Pretty much. And then after that was going to be 5e, but that didn't go anywhere, which makes the impressions video I did on the primer a bit amusing in hindsight. Although I don't want to slag on what happened back then too much, but the insistence on trying to replicate the real time with pause approach that's in Remake and Rebirth, I still think that would have been a terrible idea.
It's a fascinating look in the change of time and culture in fan communities.
Mm-hmm. And I do style myself as a bit of a historian, even in an unofficial capacity, because Lord knows I'm not going to get a curator's license. Not sure I'd want one, to be honest. But when it came to Legend Edition, the idea was use FF Legend as a foundational pillar and take in elements from the previous attempts. A little bit from D6, a little bit from fourth edition, a little bit from D20, a little bit from returners. Then I found out that one of the people I was interviewing was the same person who did that FF project that used Star Wars Saga Edition as its base, which he was perfectly fine with me stealing ideas from it. But by the time I put two and two together on that front, we had already been way too far ahead on things. And as Zan and I started doing the concepting and narrowing down ideas, that was where we started to develop the pillars. And we've talked about the pillars on multiple occasions, and we're probably going to revisit that. But if there's one message that I really want to get across to anybody who's thinking about making their own fan game or semi-official or full-on official, it is important right from the get-go to have a clear idea of what you're trying to do, and make sure that the writing that you put into that is something that carries that mindset through. Because Zan, you and I have seen a lot of people get kind of wishy-washy in terms of, I want to make a game based on blank, but they spend way too much time focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah, we've given out the same advice, I think, at this point ad nauseum. The first thing, in my opinion, and in fact in experience, that anyone should be doing when they want to create a game is to determine what the core concept is and what your core ethos is. That way you have a solid pillar to build all your mechanics around, and the mechanics should fit in holistically, not stacking on System A and System Z just because you believe they're both cool. Do these actually fit your core concept? Do they fit the type of game you're trying to make? There are a lot of questions you have to ask before you can actually write out the system.
I agree, clarity of intent and scope is vital to almost any project in any field.
And
exactly.
As much of an asshole as he is, John Wick was right about the 3 questions concept that he put forward some years back. No, not Baba Yaga. That's not the John Wick I'm referring to. But
shoot everyone.
Shoot everyone, she says. I mean, again, the wrong John Wick, but yes.
Like if you've played around with L5R, you're probably familiar with him at least once, for better and for worse. Because he's a phenomenal game designer. He's just a bit of an asshole.
A bit, Monk.
Yeah, some years back he talked about how balance isn't necessary for role-playing games, and everybody got on his ass on it because the void spells that he introduced back in 2nd edition were ridiculously broken. So it's like, don't throw stones in that glass house. But
exactly.
There were 3 questions that he put forward. What is your game about? How does it go about doing that? What behaviors are you trying to encourage and or discourage? And
which are all very broad questions, but as you ask them, they will bring a very clear picture to your mind of the game you're actually trying to create.
Mm-hmm. Now, with that said, I think this is as good a time as any to go through the questions that were submitted in advance, and that'll open it up to. And of course, anybody who's watching, feel free to put any questions that you may have in the comments. I'm getting.
I would encourage that you keep those questions until we've gotten to the end of the actual list we currently have.
Mhm.
That way they don't get lost in a chat shuffle.
Yep.
That way we can continue to keep this going.
Because when I announced that this Q&A was going to happen, I knew that for some, they may not be able to make it because of the time frame. So I put a form to set that up in advance. Of course it was the first time I'd used forms, so there were a bit of stumbling blocks. But the first couple we have are from Anonymous. Second is first is what can be expected from Final Fantasy TRPG Legend Edition. I think that's a question that can be best answered by the pillar philosophy, Zan.
Yep, and I have that page open for a very specific reason, because we actually state in the very first chapter our goals with Final Fantasy Legend Edition. We have 3 main pillars we've built the game around. The first pillar is mythos, not setting. And what this means is we're not developing Final Fantasy Legend Edition around a specific Final Fantasy game. It's not going to be representative of just 1 or 2 games. What we wanted to do was take the themes, the ideas, the motifs, and essentially the soul of what makes Final Fantasy, and make a sandbox game where anyone can make their own Final Fantasy fly. If you've ever had a story you thought you would be a really cool Final Fantasy story, then this game might be for you, because this isn't specific to any one of the video games. It's specific to the feeling of what Final Fantasy is.
The vibe of FF.
Exactly. And in my humble opinion, this game definitely passes that vibe check.
And thank you, Prospero, for joining the temple. But and yes, I use the clang sound from Berserk as the join notification, because I can.
Of course, Monk. Of course.
Oh.
But some of the things that we list, certain concepts, names, things that may return, such as crystals, the types of magic and the spells, ships, a character named Sid, things of that nature, are part of what we incorporated to make sure we kept the feeling of Final Fantasy, but not in any specific setting. This is not a game set in, for example, Final Fantasy VII's Gaia. This is not a game set on Final Fantasy X's Spira. This is not a game set in Etro. This is not a game set in any one of the universes. Mm-hmm. This is a game where you can set it in any universe. And we definitely tried to make sure that even if you set it in a universe that seems almost completely alien to Final Fantasy, it'd still feel like Final Fantasy. Mm-hmm. A big part of that was, we know that the series has done a lot of different themes. There's been a lot of futuristic elements. There's been a lot of magipunk elements. There's been a lot of what some people call classical fantasy elements. And we call it all a Gestalt fantasy. Mm-hmm. And not everything is explored in there, at least not every type of fantasy under the sun, but we feel that this could fit most fantasies. I could definitely see us making a Western version of Final Fantasy out of this.
I mean, we kind of already have that. I mean, Wild Arms has been around for a long ass time, and yes, I do stand Wild Arms in my temple.
Or if I want to get really specific for another
Big
Square.
Agree.
If I want to get specific for another Square game, Live Alive Sunset's chapter.
Yeah, and Live Alive is its own beast that is far more influential than people think.
I love Live Alive.
We've covered elsewhere.
Yeah,
but I will note the big reason why Mythos Oversetting is one of our pillars is something that I noticed with other attempts at doing Final Fantasy in TTRPG form. The majority of them are ones that skew much more towards the SNES era in general. I would definitely say stuff like D6 and the D20 version as well as fourth edition. There's a lot of skewing towards that era, which is understandable for a lot of the designers of those games. That's where they got their start. However, and this was something that I really hammered home about during our long discussions about some of the dumbass discourse about Final Fantasy 16, is that there's a not insignificant amount of people for whom that wasn't their introduction. The supposed required classics was not their introduction to it. And so if they want to build something that is a little bit more on the contemporary side of things, whether it be the Magipunk of 7, or the futurism of 8 and 13, or the semi-futurism but in a different style of 10, or even the full-on steampunk of 12.
Monk, I would actually argue that 10 is post-apocalypse.
Yeah, that could be. 10 is recurring apocalypse.
So, so it's Numenera. Got it. I'm not wrong.
You're not.
But
You're definitely not.
But the point is, for those who have those other entries that aren't the SNES era. Sorry about that. They should be able to replicate what they wanted more easily, because otherwise you're putting a bunch of unnecessary hurdles in front of them. And I know someone will say, well, just house rule it. House ruling is a spice.
It's a garnish. It should never be the main dish.
Mm-hmm. And if we're gonna give Todd Howard all the shit in the universe, which he deserves, for the fact that you have to do a bunch of mods to make his games work, I don't think TTRPGs should be given a free pass.
Consistency is key.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, we move on to our second pillar, and our second pillar is customization is king. One of the primary things that inspired many of the mechanics of this game is the legend system, as we've discussed pretty heavily in many different places. Mm-hmm. Legend system was a custom hack that arose in Giant in the Playground, based off of the D20 system of 2000 and sometimes parts of third and 3.5 D&D, where the entire idea was you could create some pretty cool custom characters by switching and swapping what were called tracks that carried different features from a character class onto another class. It also determined the speed at which you got certain features, because each track had a different speed at which those features would come to your level. But that's not the only part of our game that is customizable. We have customization not just in your character classes and how you're going to get your features, but also in your equipment. Your magical items specifically have their own enchantment system. We have customization in NPC creation, and Matt knows that intimately.
A little too intimately.
Hey, you're the one who chose to take on the bestiary. Don't look at me.
I'm cool with it. I'm honestly, it might sound like I complain about it, but it's been a lot of fun, to be honest.
Yep. Even things like skills and feats have a lot of play in them, so that you can. The entire way we wanted this game to play out is you can take two people with the same class and the same sets of jobs, and we'll get into that later. And they would still play wildly different, and we would consider that successful. We also as part of customization of King, while we don't say it explicitly, we also took what we've been calling the Brawl Minus approach. A little bit of context there. There were some very popular Super Smash Bros. Brawl mods. One was called Brawl Plus, which attempted to balance the character roster so that it could be used for competitive play. It attempted to bring up the people who were lagging and flatten out the curve for those who are too high. Hello, Meta Knight, you fucking triple S tier character. But remember, tires don't exits. But Brawl Minus, the entire ethos there was, if everyone's broken, no one is. Yes, that's a Syndrome reference. Or, the Borker the Better is my favorite tagline of theirs. And it just gave everybody the most broken skill sets possible. Captain Falcon's Falcon Knee became an assassination technique. The Warlock Punch, while still slow, if it hits you, you are immediately at 999% damage and just went flying. It also had some pretty fucking stupid super armor. And then Bowser just had Giga Bowser's super armor all the time. But there were a lot of things Brawl Minus did to fuck with people, and it was great. It is glorious. And so part of our customization is, if you can design something that you think is going to be terribly, horribly broken, and it turns out terribly, horribly broken, cool.
We even discovered some combinations that could be, if not broken, particularly annoying, and we kept them in there because it was part of the fun.
Yeah. We don't want to punish you for creating a cool customization that also just so happens to be overpowered. We also don't want to punish you for creating a customization that might be underpowered. That may happen at some point. I don't know. I probably don't think so. We tried to make everything as viable as possible. But, you know,
yeah.
there will likely be trends. I very much think that'll be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It can be fun to limit yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
I can speak from experience with some of the NPCs that we've put in, especially some of the last minute additions. There are a few that might make you scratch your head a bit and be like, some sick bastard wrote this willingly.
Vice the Immaculate.
Oh, I'm thinking of our favorite Final Fantasy XI raid boss, but
I'm still saying fuck you for suggesting that.
Hey, Absolute Virtue is I think a testament to how well our NPC creation system works, Monk.
It is, but I have to hold to my principles.
Oh, I know.
Oh, that's fair. That's so fair.
But I think the best part that boils down what our customization is King Pillar builds into is actually the last sentence we have in the section in the book, which is, we wish to give a space for players or GMs to pick the options that fit the characters in the story which facilitate the story, not necessarily the optimized choice. And that is important to us because we don't want people to feel like they have to min-max. You certainly can if you want to, but we don't want you to feel like there are choices which are, as Monk and I refer to it, pay not to suck.
Looking at you, look, I know I keep picking on it a lot, but anyone who's played third edition or Pathfinder, Whirlwind Attack.
Yeah. And then finally, the third pillar that we have is a 4-act adventuring structure. This structure is built based on the very tight gameplay loop Dragon Quest started with. Mm-hmm. A gameplay loop of town, field, dungeon, which spread into all of its contemporaries early on. Essentially, it boils down to, you go to the town to get your items and prepare for the adventure ahead. You go through the field to reach your goal, usually a dungeon or something of that nature, caves, a massive castle, something like that, the field is a place for you to grow and also experiment with the things that you've obtained thus far. And then the dungeon is a place for you to really hammer hard on the things you're good at. It's the place where you're tested, and you beat the final boss at the end of the dungeon, and then you come out of the dungeon, and usually there's a next town on the horizon for the whole cycle to start again. Our 4-act structure tries to give a similar tight gameplay loop. And the 4 acts in order are preparation, which is, you're getting your gear together, you're going to go get your items and stuff, you're going to prepare for the actual expedition ahead. Then there's exploration, which is almost what it sounds like on the tin. Exploring, investigation, any sorts of skill checks you might need to make to do cool stuff or find cool things will happen here. And you're going to have most of your random battle encounters here. The third step is called encounter, and that's not to be confused with random encounters. Encounter is whatever the central conflict comes to a head to, whether that's you facing down some boss-like character to get a new clue on a large campaign you may be going through, or whether this is you guys came together to pull your Ocean's 11 heist, and this is the actual fucking heist that you're now doing. That would be the encounter. That final little bit where everything comes together and you have the big revelations, the cool shit happening. Then the final step is downtime. The party has completed this step of their adventure. They are going to take the time to rest, relax, lick their wounds, count their coin, and maybe even, if this is a bigger story, go over some things and go, I remember this one thing that happened at this one place. It seemed kind of suspicious, and people start adding 2 and 2 and getting 4. But these 4 steps are meant to give a structured gameplay loop. And I actually had someone ask me a while back when I introduced this to them. They asked me, are those steps supposed to happen in a single session, or are they supposed to happen over the course of a campaign? My answer was yes. They didn't quite understand. I'm like, it depends on the type of game you're trying to play. Another reason we have this tight gameplay loop is we want to make sure that we pay homage to both the Japanese side of things as well as the Western side of things when it comes to both tabletop RPGs and Final Fantasy. In the Japanese niche, long-form campaigns are not necessarily the norm. In fact, usually it's a lot of one-shots or small missions, modules, things of that nature. Even with, if anybody's been watching our regular Cloister of the Dice episodes, with Sword World, you'll notice that a lot of what we do in Sword World, which is a Japanese tabletop RPG, they seem more like small modules strung together into a larger campaign, which is totally fine. I love it. I'm gathering all the side quests because I'm a little side quest gremlin that way.
Mm-hmm.
But these acts, you could go through all 4 of these steps in a single session, especially for the heist example I used earlier. You could prepare by getting all your heist equipment. Your exploration could be getting all the security information, guard routes, etc., bribes that you need out of the way. And then, of course, the encounter is you doing the heist. And the downtime is, well, what were the consequences of that heist? Did you succeed and score big? Did you fail and maybe piss off someone you shouldn't have? That could happen in a single session. But then if you're making a Final Fantasy campaign where, well, it's I'm some plucky guy whose village just got sucked into the ground and now I have to go save the world, this could happen over the course of a campaign and inside sessions. There could be small little mini things you do on a single session that go through this whole loop, and then the whole campaign itself could go through this loop. So this 4-act structure is meant to give that tight loop that then the GM can adjust as needed for whatever their purposes are.
Yeah. Some of this loop is loosely inspired by a concept that you see a lot in a lot of things in East Asia. It's under a lot of it's a 4-act structure that's under a lot of names. but the one I'm most familiar with is the one used in Japan. That is Kisho Tenketsu.
Yep.
When I say it's a lot of things, it's not just story writing. I've seen it used in copy editing. I've seen it used in level design. It's used everywhere. And I believe it is introduction, development, twist, and epilogue.
Or conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
whichever you want to use. But yes, it is that type of literary device, similar to the 3-act structure you may see in the West. It's a little more fleshed out in certain places. And yes, Cloudbreaker Alliance does use something similar to that. That's true. But I think those 3 pillars best answer this very general question of what can be expected from this game. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, and to go through every detail would be to unveil the work of 3.5 years painstakingly, and I don't think anybody has the time for that. It'd be like a 12-hour stream.
We'd be here for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question we have: how have damage resistance and vulnerability, which maximize or minimize a subset of your rolled damage dice, worked out in testing? This anonymous asker is a little concerned about having to ask their targets about all of their defensive effects before they roll damage every time they roll, especially on a digital tabletop.
So, using this on a digital tabletop is something that is not first priority right now. I will note that, but in terms of resistance and vulnerability, the particular scenario that's being put here is one that we can't necessarily plan for. If you're having a table where somebody's asking the defensive effects, that's a table by table thing. But the simple way it works is that if something has resistance, and then a certain number, that number is always treated as ones when it comes to the damage die rolled. So if you're making an attack that would do 2d6 damage, but the enemy has resistance 1 to the type of damage that's being done, well, one of those dice is automatically rolled as a 1.
Yeah, it's better way to put this: if you are a black mage and you're casting Firaga at something and it has DR Fire 2 of your dice are going to just automatically be 1s for that fire damage.
Mm-hmm. And vulnerability works in the opposite way.
So now if you're a black mage casting Firaga at something that has damage vulnerability 2 to fire, 2 of your dice are automatically going to be maximized. Mm-hmm. So I know that at some points in Firaga we do like 3d12 damage. Mm-hmm. So like 2 of those would be 12s automatically. So being able to hit damage vulnerabilities and and avoid damage resistances is actually a thing, and I'm pretty sure we have Libra somewhere in the game, don't we?
We do have Libra, but it's exclusive to blue magic.
Oh, that's right. That one tells if anything has a blue magic spell they can learn. I remember we repurposed Libra.
Yeah, because as I know that Scan and Libra are iconic spells, but in terms of working them out in tabletop, it amounted to the hint button in every Sierra game I've ever played in my life.
And not to mention the fact that that would get really, I think tedious is the best word. Somebody would be attempting to cast it every encounter, and they'd have to make their casting roll to make sure that they overcome, the target's magical defense or skill defense that they might be using, and then maybe they have to spend some more MP to push their target number higher. It would, and then you'd get what would really be the most tedious part of that is because of our NPC creation system, we have a bestiary that exists as a I'm getting a slight echo off Theo there. I keep seeing him jump on reactive.
That'd be me. I'm like legitimately my sound is like 20%, and I'm not sure what's happening.
I'm not sure what's happening.
Are you using a desktop mic?
No.
Okay, that's that.
That's weird.
We'll just chalk
That's weird.
it up to technology likes to give us the middle finger.
Yes.
Apparently it
Yeah,
does.
that's-
Okay, let me check something. Maybe like this.
That's
Testing.
very soft.
Yeah.
Okay, like this.
Mm-hmm.
How about
Yeah,
that?
Mm-hmm.
We can hear you.
Meanwhile, the bestiary is just a picture of me.
The breastiary. I see.
I haven't gotten to that yet.
It's all pictures of Riona, and one
Okay.
of them is the "Do It for Her" meme.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. It's all pictures of Riona. Specifically, one part of Riona is like zoomed in.
Yeah. So
The bestiary is examples of iconic monsters from Final Fantasy games and how you could potentially create them. But it is not an exhaustive list. And I actually remember saying this to Matt when he talked about some people over in the FF tabletop server and how they had an issue with some of the end boss characters being immune to every status effect.
don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yep. I had a statement, and just because not necessarily everybody would have gotten this statement at the time. This is Xanatrix Adari, one of the two primary developers for Final Fantasy TRPG Legend Edition. When Mildred and I were designing the game, the bestiary was not actually initially planned. One of the core concepts to the game is customization is king, and we wanted creature NPC design to be no different. After we designed the NPC creation rules, we figured there needed to be some examples of how a player or GM could use the NPC creation rules, which is when the idea of the bestiary was officially formed. The bestiary is meant to be both an homage to Final Fantasy NPCs past and present, and a detailed set of examples for players and GMs to look at and get an idea of how the NPC creation rules can shine. The bestiary is not an exhaustive or definitive set of creatures for Final Fantasy TRPG Legend Edition, and we would always encourage players and GMs to use the NPC creation rules to customize their own creatures, NPCs, and encounters however they like. Finally, the creatures found in the bestiary are transcribed from their official stat blocks found on the Final Fantasy wiki, which I linked to the finalfantasy.fandom.com wiki.
Mm-hmm.
This includes many bosses which have total status immunity, and we faithfully transcribed those as well. However, you do not have to use any of the creatures as they are shown in the bestiary, and always have the option to change anything you want about them, or even create something entirely new. In short, the bestiary is not prescriptive, it is descriptive, and we hope you will have fun modifying and creating NPCs to your heart's content. So, the bestiary is examples of how things can pan out, but the NPC creation rules are the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's actually really important that we keep them as close to the video games as possible, so that way you can see an example of, well, this thing in the game that you're familiar with from this game. How exactly would this work in our system? There you go. That's how. There's your starting point. Feel free to edit as you choose.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Just to clear up some confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And Riona puts it the best way. You could do whatever you want, but here are some cool things you can do as an example. Absolutely.
That the example is important because and we will be dedicating a episode of Geek Watch to this in the future. Guidance is something that Zan and I have harped on a lot of games about. And I've gotten a lot of trouble for harping on it in some cases.
People who get on your... Imagine that. People who want the game to be as obfuscated as possible. Couldn't possibly be an ivory tower retirement home we talk about all the time.
couldn't
Well, that's one
possibly
aspect
be.
of it. The other is the story gamers who think that me saying guidance means I want something spoon-fed to me.
Or an entire exhaustive list, which is not what we want.
Mm-hmm.
The ethos behind why guidance is so important to us is the statement, every game is someone's first. There's no guarantee that the person picking up your book is familiar with your game or even familiar with tabletop RPGs in the first place. The more guidance you have, not only do you help those new people understand how a game works and how they can use it, you also have a way to remind and refresh veteran players how something might work, or even give them some inspiration into how to play little tricks and little fun little interludes with your game. The more guidance something has, the less opaque it is, and transparency into rules is very important.
And this is also important with ones that have more of a narrativist element, because just relying on the ability of the veterancy of the players is a bandage. And you may not have too much of a problem, but you're not every player in existence. You're not every table in existence.
Yeah. And so, ultimately, resistance and vulnerability are going to balance out in specific ways, and
we just wanted it to have a bigger impact than a few points added or subtracted. But we didn't want it to be the whole whole thing that, say, 5e does, which is going too far the other way.
Yeah. So it maximize or minimize. It's fairly easy to understand. The number indicates how many dice are maximized or minimized, and then the indicator of the damage type indicates against what damage type that applies. And I think that basically covers everything regarding that question.
Yeah. So the next question is from Black Crimson 543. Will the job system work similarly to FF14, where you need to have some jobs for the prerequisites of other ones, like how you need to be a Lancer before you can be a Dragoon? Let me answer this one simply. No. There are no prerequisite jobs. There is not much in the way of prestige class jobs that you have to qualify for later. There is not a job tree like there is in the Tactics series of games. You have a list of jobs that are available. The only rule is at least one of the jobs that you pick has to be associated with your class. Everything after that is free game.
And
well, within the 3 or 4 job limit, obviously.
Yeah, and I think there's a question later on that we'll get into more about classes and jobs here. But yeah, there's no prerequisites beyond you have a class that you have chosen. One job must be from that class, and that's it. Other than that, you can then pick jobs from any of the other classes or the independent job tree.
Yeah,
and we'll get into that.
We will. And the big reason that I didn't want to do that is I feel that the job trees that you see in 14 or especially in Tactics are far too setting specific. And again, we're not building with any particular setting in mind. If somebody wants to do Ivalice in their campaign, that's a table by table question. It's not a question that we are in a position or have any desire to answer. There's also the fact that I wanted to avoid the false choice problem that can happen with, say, prestige classes, for instance. Where because of the fact that you're trying to get a particular prestige class, when you are already planning all of your choices that you'd get at certain level ups in advance. So the choice part just becomes a formality.
Yep. And with that, we go on to our next question. This is the first question from Cosmic Polis.
Mm-hmm.
Given the discussion I have seen about Ranger, am I correct in assuming that mechanical identity / niche is taken more into consideration when choosing the jobs that are in the game than the presence of said jobs in FF titles? What are some jobs we can expect that didn't exist in FF games but fill a mechanical niche in the system? Actually, that's a pretty close marriage, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
We looked at all the jobs, and I mean all the jobs. We went through every fucking job ever seen in Final Fantasy and some jobs seen in other games, such as the Bravely series, etc.
And remember,
And
the Bravely series was done by the same team that did 4 Heroes of Light. So, as far as I'm concerned, it still counts.
Yep. We took a look at all the jobs, and the first thing we did is we consolidated whatever jobs overlapped into a single job. You know, these jobs all do the same thing, so collapse that down into a job named X, and now we have that job. Such as what we did with Performer from Bravely Default and Dancer. It's all Entertainer.
Mm-hmm. We did it as Entertainer, even though I remember some folk calling me out and claiming that that was arbitrary, because from my perspective, the central idea of Bard and Dancer were too similar to each other. They're support-based classes that are themed around performance. And I also wanted it that somebody could do that particular thing without falling into the trap of needing to use dancing weapons or needing to utilize an instrument, which is an unfortunate assumption that's made with Bard characters.
Yeah. Riona also pointed out something regarding the prerequisite question. She said, I would compare the gun classes and Outlaws of Alkenstar of why the prerequisite is best avoided. It's true.
Yeah, I can go with that.
But in inclusion to us looking at a bunch of jobs, consolidating those that overlap each other into a single job, we also made sure that mechanical and identity niche did fit the game. There were jobs we cut out just because either they didn't fill anything new, or they just don't work as a TTRPG job.
And
so it is very much mechanical identity and niche were taken very seriously with every job.
Part of when you only have one primary class to speak of, you can allow that. And I see Kira's in the chat. Hey there. When you have only one primary class as part of your design, multi-classing notwithstanding, because in a lot of those cases multi-classing is optional. You can allow for that particular class to be multi-purpose. You can have the fighter have some crafting abilities, like in, say, Fantasy Craft, even though that's the soldier, not the fighter, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't obvious, Fantasy Craft was another one of my major inspirations, because I fucking love Fantasy Craft.
Yeah.
But because of the fact that the class features are dependent on the job part of character creation, and since those are individual tracks, each of those jobs has to be much more focused in having a particular niche, a particular thing that it's doing that isn't stepping on the toes of others. If you look at, say, Pathfinder, you'll see plenty of jobs that are slightly different variants of other jobs, especially all of the hybrid jobs. You know, where it's in a similar ballpark as another job, but slightly different. Like, say, the Cavalier, which nobody uses, or the Slayer, which some people use, or the Frenzy, which is just a slightly different version of the Barbarian.
Yeah.
Not the Frenzy, the Fury. Sorry. And that is something that we can't do, and because of that, each of them has to have something specific that they instantly bring to the table from the word go. One job that we had early on that we tried to utilize was the Puppet Master, which had one appearance in Final Fantasy XI. However, as hard as we tried, we could not give it a particular niche that wasn't stepping on somebody else's toes. So we got rid of it.
Yeah, it tended to step on the toes of engineer or a few other companion type classes we have.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as for the second half of that question, are there any jobs that fulfill a niche that weren't necessarily in Final Fantasy? We have a ton.
Yeah.
Just starting in the warrior jobs, the dervish is a dexterity / dodge type berserker. Basically, they do with agility what a berserker does with vitality.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, we have I think some of my favorite things are from the expert skill, the expert job trees. Covert ops, which if you're thinking the Turks, yes. The dynamo, which works as a battlefield momentum. The more they're doing in battle, the stronger they're getting, essentially. And then in mage classes. Let me get down there. I am in the we while this may sound like it isn't, it's cheating, and I'm going to use it anyway. Arcanist is specifically inspired by the Bravely Default version of Arcanist and how it plays with status effects.
Mm-hmm.
And then Yokai also comes from the Bravely series, except instead of changing it so that the 7 sins give you some spells or summons, the way the yokai works is summoners summon eidolons. Yokai bring the eidolon into the body and become part eidolon.
Yeah.
So, as a yokai of Bahamut, you might grow wings, dragon scales, and fangs and claws, and be able to eventually mega flare somebody. So there are definitely some stuff we took, ideas, little inspirations, and made some really cool mechanical niches. I think my favorite one in the Adept tree is the Sword Saint. The Sword Saint just does not exist anywhere in Final Fantasy.
There was also the general, while Leo was a general in terms of the class name given to him.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted his version would just be a fighter variant, and we wanted something that filled that battlefield commander that, say, the Warlord did in D&D 4th edition, or the Marshal attempted to do in 3rd edition, if it wasn't stuck in the miniatures handbook.
Yep.
That lead from the front tactician, the guy who doesn't hit you with his weapon, he hits you with his allies.
He hits a motherfucker with another motherfucker, but it isn't him holding that motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we also have a huge list of independent jobs, and there are a lot of jobs in there that again are taken from the Bravely series, but are also jobs that technically only exist as things you see NPCs doing, or are just pictures that we saw and thought were cool. Specifically, the Chocobo Knight, which Monk said, "I want a living in the saddle archetype," and I remember seeing this picture of a bunch of people, or this cutscene of a bunch of people doing a lance charge on chocobos, and I want that.
There was also a concept art image I came across from FF11 that had a literal chocobo knight, wielding a knight's lance.
Yeah, and so he is our born in the saddle type class. Chocobo knight can be literal. You can be a knight that rides a chocobo, but a chocobo knight could also be someone who if any of you have seen Akudama Drive and know who Courier is, he fights from the back of his fucking supercharged giant cannon fucking motorcycle. This would be the same type of archetype. We also extrapolated a couple of classes from Final Fantasy 15, specifically the Crown's Guard and the King's Glaive. They do what you think they do. The Crown's Guard can summon astral weapons as being the guard of the king, or of whatever power they're pledged to. The King's Glaive can, well, warp strike. We do have a warp strike system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that a lot of the jobs that are introduced that aren't technically actually jobs in the video games are all inspired by, prominent elements in the series. It's kind of like when 14 brought in the Gunbreaker, and Gunbreaker wasn't a job in the past, but it was based on something very specific from the series history. That's kind of how I like to see things like Dervish and Dynamo and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I know I said that I didn't want slightly different variations, and one might say that the Dervish is that. It's only that on the surface, because yes, they're both archetypes of they're both variants of the Berserker concept. The thing is, the Berserker is big damage. The Dervish hits more. Has a much higher hit rate, and has much higher combo potential.
Also gets different buffs, like completely different buffs.
And the two are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, you can't rage and war trance at the same time, people. Just so you know.
Oh.
I think that covers that first question by Cosmic Police.
Yeah. Now the second question is, how is combat/non-combat stuff divided? Is it like FFRPG 4th edition, where there is no relation except for the teleport group? Or do your choice of job/spell/combat options affect how your character plays when not in combat? As a follow-up, are there any out-of-combat mechanics you want to highlight?
For the most part, I would say they're pretty divided.
They are.
There's a specific skill game, and we'll get into that because that's an out-of-combat mechanic I definitely want to highlight. That would be affected by your choice of jobs, spells, and combat options. But for the most part, combat options and out-of-combat options are going to be fairly separate.
And the big reason that we did this is I've seen some class designs that have a out-of-combat option as part of features in some cases, but a lot of times they're very situational and rely on certain assumptions. I felt that it was better to have those two separated, so that you don't end up painting yourself into a stereotype corner.
Yeah.
Also allow us wiggle room for what we could do with that space.
Yes. Combat is very refined, but so are skills. And the out-of-combat option here that I want to highlight, the skill games, are fucking awesome. Skill games are essentially non-combat encounter group dynamic type in conflicts, and they don't even necessarily have to be like a straight up like head-to-head conflict. We have two types of skill games that use tokens within the system to execute certain actions towards the resolution of that skill game. There are games in which both parties of the skill game are bidding tokens, and whoever has the highest bid takes their action first. Then there's option games, where each party chooses a number of actions up to the skill game's maximum, and all parties reveal their chosen actions after actions have been chosen, and they each have to pay a number of tokens equal to the actions chosen. The examples that we have of bidding games all are going to sound very similar, but they're not as similar as you might think. We have interrogation, persuasion, and negotiation. And negotiation these are all different ways of getting information in, not necessarily even social settings, but it could be in social settings. There are different ways of interacting with these groups that get you the information. Persuasion is sort of the baseline. You can start a persuasion skill game easiest. It can move into interrogation or negotiation depending on the actions you take. And then, of course, negotiation is all about quid pro quo. Your give and take. Whereas interrogation, it is very clear one party has the advantage because they're going to force the other party to give them information. Mm-hmm. And these are all just ways to have that dynamic without having a combat situation necessarily. And this is actually one of the times where I got to browbeat Monk about his own advice regarding guidance. Mm-hmm. Because in the interrogation bidding game, there were 3 degrees of intel that were discussed, called a tidbit of information, actionable intelligence, and deep dark secrets. And we had no examples of this. I'm like, Monk, where's the examples? Mm-hmm. And so when we came up with it and started talking about it, first the general definitions were: a tidbit of information is a surface level piece of information that could also be easily obtained from other sources. Actionable intelligence would be intelligence that is only accessible to specific associated groups and networks. And deep dark secrets are intensely personal or highly secretive pieces of information that may only be known to a select few or even just one person. And we had an example for a protagonist, Zidane Tribal. A tidbit of information would be his association with Tantalus. Actionable intelligence would be that Tantalus aren't actually traveling performers, but thieves. And the deep dark secret would be the fact that Zidane is a genome from Terra. Then talking about an antagonist such as Arden, Izunia from Final Fantasy XV, mm-hmm. A tidbit of information is that he's the Imperial ambassador. Actionable intelligence would be that he plays both sides of the war against the other, and the deep dark secret is that he's the brother of the founding king of Lucis, and his real name is Arden Lucis Calum. Mm-hmm. And then finally, about organizations, we used Seed, where the tidbit of information would be that Seed acts as a private mercenary organization, with its infrastructure being the Garden Academies. Actionable intelligence would be that Balaam Garden is funded by an individual or organization named Norg, and the deep dark secret being that the original purpose of Seed was to train anti-sorceress fighters. And so we got to get some examples in there that I was very happy to get in there. Mm-hmm. As for the option games are a lot more head-to-head in many cases. Especially we have a dueling game, which has a bit of a different set of modules that change how the duels work. Mm-hmm. And so you can have a duel that doesn't necessarily end in death. We have an investigation game, which is this entire game is designed as an engine to push forward a large plot if you really want to.
Yes.
There are many things that can be done in investigation, and they can essentially help build a narrative, especially if you have a narrative in mind and your party wants to fuck off on side quests. You could still use the investigation game to say, hey, at least other things are advancing, just so you know. Mm-hmm. But the last option game is the one where your jobs, actions, features, etc. matter most. I mean, sure, the dueling game does have a pretty good influence from some of the things you've chosen during character creation, but the parkour game is where it really, really matters, because there is a piece of action in the parkour game, a specific action you can take that allows you to attack people while doing parkour.
Yeah.
It's specifically it's a sort of aggression
Mm-hmm.
action. You can make attack rolls. You can, and that's going to really be dependent on what you've chosen for jobs and for your spells or other combat options.
Mm-hmm.
But besides that, like I said, they're mostly divorced.
Yeah. And again, the reason for that is if we had it more integrated, then we wouldn't be able to do the skill games.
Yeah. See, guys, a good follow-up question to this. He says, how easy would it be to create a custom skill game for ourselves?
Relatively easily, because even with all the variations, they're still built on one of two frameworks: bidding or option.
So you would determine what the goal of whatever custom game you want to make is going to do, whether this is something where one person needs to win out over the other by taking an advantage, or whether this is a head-to-head, people are throwing shit at each other sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that would really determine whether you're going to use a bidding game or an option game. And then from there you could build it up, what actions you have, what's available to each party, etc. Gold saucer mini games, here we go. Food fight game, I love it. I love it. Monk, they've got so many ideas, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So our third question from Cosmic Police is very adjacent to my previous question, so feel free to merge them. Presumably, combat will involve various characters taking actions turn by turn. What kind of structure will non-combat activities, exploring, talking to people, escaping a reactor that's about to blow up, follow, if any? So, actually, I think we covered that already.
Yeah.
Exploring would be in the investigation skill game.
That's
or
one
at
way.
least
That's one way it could
be. It could be. Talking to people can be any one of the three option games, or bidding games. Excuse me. You could use persuasion, negotiation, or interrogation, or you could just role play it. If it's not necessary that people are making high stakes social moves against each other, and you're just trying to get some information, you could just role play it. Maybe do a persona roll for it, a persona skill roll. Escaping a reactor's about to blow up would absolutely be a parkour game. It'd be a parkour game with a timer, essentially.
Yeah.
And then the last question by Cosmic here. I looked a bit into the Legend TTRPG, and it seems that enemies in that system are built in the exact same way players are. Will this system work differently to reflect how Final Fantasy combat is typically pretty asymmetrical in terms of HP, damage, etc.? If yes, what will building a new enemy look like, and how many pre-built iconic enemies can we expect?
Oh boy.
I love this question. Give it to Matt. Matt, this is your question. Go for it.
Oh boy. All right.
I'm not wrong. It's Matt's question.
No, it literally is. I've immersed myself in this section of the game for far too long. So I guess I'm going to answer the last question first. So, we talked about before how all the NPCs, all of the enemies that we have in the game are just, starting places, examples that you can use. And you might think, oh, okay, well then you probably included a few of like the really iconic ones like Behemoth and Bomb and that kind of stuff. Let me tell you, our bestiary is a cool 200 NPCs. Just to give you a little insight into what I've been dealing with lately. But no, in all seriousness, it's really cool. It's a really cool bestiary. I'm very happy with it.
Wow.
But there is so much stuff in here. Literally any archetype that you could think of, even if you want to come up with an enemy that isn't in the bestiary, or you want to think of something completely original, there's so many good starting places to come from here. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the like the asymmetry, in terms of like the HP and all that, I feel like that's something that would be better for one of you to answer.
So,
because I've seen obviously that we have the NPC creation system.
which is vastly different from the player creation system, the character creation system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think it's interesting that this question is asked, because I did just add something to the game that kind of plays around with that, but I'll get to that later. I think we should explain some things first.
So I want to take this piece by piece. Now,
Yeah.
I'm aware of what he's talking about the enemies in the system built in the same way players are. In fact, there are particular tracks that could be considered monster specific within Legend system.
Legend, yeah.
Now, we wanted to utilize a custom NPC creation system for a few reasons. One of them is the fact that we did not want to eternally play catch up with new entries, or even entries in games Final Fantasy adjacent that we hadn't accounted for at the time. Secondly, and this is something that is very important, there is no set level when it comes to monsters in our system, because the customization that we took was heavily inspired by the custom NPC creation system in Fantasycraft, and that one is and in both cases you have a series of picking advantages and disadvantages and adding up the total costs. The reason for doing this is I don't want people to feel that they're bottlenecked in terms of what monsters they'd want to use at certain parts of the campaign just because of the overall level of the party. If somebody wants to use kobolds late game, they should be able to use them. If somebody wants to use bombs late games, they should be able to use them. If somebody wants to use a Tonberry early game, not sure why you'd want to do that, but you do you. you can do that. Just don't be surprised when the inevitable doink happens.
Everybody's grudge.
Yeah, but it's set up in a way where you'll pick all the stats when you create a monster, but instead of having one stat spread for one level, and you'll notice this in the bestiary, there will be these huge tables for every NPC, every stat block, and it looks like this huge set of stats, but what it really is it's 20 columns that divide up different stat spreads for each average player level, so you can introduce that monster at any point. And it's really easy to look into that. And again, when you create your own monster, you can choose to say you want to have one monster that the party fights early on in a campaign, set it for like level 3, and then you're like, I want to reintroduce this monster, but my party is now level 15, so let's just make some adjustments to it. And you can do that. It's very easy to do that.
It's also a nod to how FF, especially throughout the years, has used reskinned versions of monsters as basically souped up versions of that, like say going from bomb to grenade.
Yep.
Which incidentally, when I was putting together the monster list, I ended up catching a few false positives of that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, we had to cut out a ton of iconic NPCs because it was the same thing with a different name and a different coat of paint.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, first, I'd like to point out that Riona said, if you want a squash match to feel strong, you can do it. If you want Vorpal Bunny deathmatch, you can do it.
Yeah.
This is true. I'd also like to point out that any monster that you make or that you take from the bestiary and are going to introduce to the party, you do not have to introduce to the actual average party level. That's just, these are the stats for this thing when the average party level is, say, level 10.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to have a squash match, say they're adventuring in an area where there are supposed to be early adventure level monsters, but they're a higher level, you could say introduce those monsters all at average party level 2, and the party goes, wow, these guys are really easy. And you go, yeah, you're at a place you're way over leveled for, because that always happens in Final Fantasy. It's up to you to adjust that yourself.
And it's for that reason that we're not using an XP system. We are going with milestone leveling.
Yeah. The game is purely milestone leveling. We don't have XP.
So what the traits add up to is not XP, but loot.
Yeah.
which we will get into that later. So the final question from Cosmic Polis is, on the example monster sheet, we see vulnerability 1, vulnerability X. What makes these different from each other, and how do they translate to damage taken? Same question in regard to reduction X and protection 18. Okay, now we can get into the damage mitigation system.
I'll let me open the combat chapter because it's all written up, and I fucking. You'll notice that a lot of this shit I've rewritten, people. A lot of it. We have
Quite
an entire...
recently, in fact.
Yes. This entire section is called damage modification because I felt like damage multiplier didn't fit since some of these don't multiply damage.
Yeah.
I'm just going to read these out one by one. There are 5 types of damage modification, and the first is damage absorption, which is what it says on the tin. You recover HP equal to the damage that the attack would inflict when hit with that type of damage.
Mm-hmm.
Damage protection. Attacks of this type must roll at a natural die facing number that is determined by the degree. So if you have damage protection 10, in order for that attack to hit at all, it has to at least roll a 10 on the d20, and then it also has to hit your defense number. So if it rolls a 10 and your defense number is like a 23 and it only has a +3, it still fails because it's 13. But if it rolled, say, a 2 and had a massive amount of modifiers that gave it a 25, it'd fail because it rolled under that 10.
The closest analog I can think of is, say, Hero Shield in Battle Network, where you have to do a minimum amount of damage in order to break it.
Mm-hmm. So
it's not a one-to-one, but it's the closest analog.
Yeah. So when you see damage protection 18, that means in order to hit, you have to roll a natural 18 on the die.
Hit with that type of damage.
Yes, with that type of damage. Because it's not going to block all damage. It's going to say something like damage protection water. So to hit with water, you'd have to roll an 18 at the very least with the accuracy roll just to hit.
Mm-hmm.
Damage reduction, as we've already discussed, reduces a number of damage dice equal to the number in all the ones. If it has an X, all damage of that type is ones. Mm-hmm. So if something has damage reduction X fire damage is reduced to all ones. Just don't use fire damage on it.
Yeah.
Conversely, damage vulnerability maximizes results. So if something has damage vulnerability X fire, hitting them with fire means all damage dice are going to be the maximum amount they can be. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how many dice there are, they're all going to be the maximum amount. And then the final damage modification that you probably don't see as much is damage spiking. And damage spiking is a 1-to-1 bypass of damage reduction.
This is armor piercing.
Yeah. If you have damage spiking 1 and someone has damage reduction fire 1, then the die that would normally be reduced to the minimum will no longer be reduced. Mm-hmm. If you have damage spiking 2 and something has damage reduction fire 3, well, now only one die is minimized. So at a 1-to-1 comparison, damage spiking counters damage reduction so that your die now has the chance to do normal damage. Mm-hmm. And finally, there's actually a set of an order of operations with all of the damage modifications except for protection, because protection it's an actual flat thing. Absorption comes first, then spiking, then reduction, then vulnerability.
Yep. And the reason for having a order of operations is so that you don't end up muddying things up where things end up canceling each other out inadvertently.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do have 2 questions from Cyber Robert. First one is, will all the classes have a single circle rather than multiple like Legends? So, we only have 4 classes. with our class and job system. Those 4 classes are Warrior, Expert, Mage, and Adept. Warrior deals with all things physical combat. Expert is all things skill monkey, or not, or just non-standard in terms of combat. A lot of non-magical support falls into Expert. Mage is, well, anything magic, and Adept is the gishes, the in-betweeners. And of course, outside of that, there are, not outside of that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Each of them has a set of jobs that they have association with. Each job would be the equivalent of 1 track in Legend. And as I said before, when you're creating characters, assuming you're not taking the full buy-in option, you pick 3 jobs. One at fast progression, 1 at medium progression, 1 at slow progression. The difference between the 3 is a 3-level stagger. So you're always getting something every level. Because I fucking hate dead levels in games.
We all hate dead levels.
And yeah,
so Dark Knight is a track. Fighter is a track. Black Mage is a track. Red Mage is a track. And I do recall someone asking me once why someone would take Black or White Mage if they can get both types of magic through Red Mage. The reason
because of the class features.
Yes. Red Mage might be able to use Black and White magic, but there's things that it can do that it's not going to be able to do as well as a pure Black Mage or a pure White Mage in that regard.
Not to mention they all have different. Every job has its own set of features, and these features are going to be. I really can't put it any other way. They're all very unique, very, very unique.
The Red Mage is a switch hitter.
Yep.
Or switch pitcher. Just don't put 2 of them at the same time in a baseball field unless you want absolute chaos back in the day. Because that happened in the... I won't get too far into that. Happened in the minor leagues. It caused a whole lot of chaos because technically speaking, nobody was breaking the rules.
Yep. So
good old technically speaking.
Yep. We also took a little bit of inspiration from the Red Mage in 14 with the balancing scales.
Mm-hmm.
And this manifests in a feature I'll go into detail here called Balance. When casting a black or white magic spell, you gain 1 point of respective black or white imbalance. This grants a +1 bonus to casting rolls of that type of spell and a -1 penalty to casting rolls of the opposite type, to a maximum of 5. If you cast the opposite type to the imbalance, it is reduced by 1. And you may purge the imbalance as an action, resetting it to 0. So essentially, if you're casting black spells as a Red Mage, you're going to get black imbalance. This means you're going to get +1 bonuses to casting rolls for black spells, and -1 bonuses to casting rolls of white spells. If you cast a white spell, it's going to, reduce your black imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And this ties into all of their other features, such as Scale Breaker. You may double the bonus or penalty of balance when casting a spell, resetting imbalance to 0 after the spell resolves. So there are things that you get from your jobs that tie into the features for that job usually. In fact, I think we made sure that everything tied in as much as possible.
Yeah, I know one might say, well, Red mages are also decent swordsmen in some games. That'd be redundant in our system because of how we have weapons work. We'll get into that. But also, I wanted a laser focus for each job track.
Yep.
And that's not to say that the job tracks are strictly speaking linear. There are some that are more linear than others, but each of them is going to have some degree of options to them. Because again, we wanted that somebody could take the same build and get the same starting build and get different results.
Mm.
Now, the second question from Cyber Robert is, I saw someone mention y'all were using yokai, I think. Well, we are. So I wanted to ask if there were any other Bravely Default / second jobs you were going to use, like Shieldmaster or Bastion.
I'll take this question.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take this question because all of the Bravely Default classes we introduced, I'm the one who suggested them.
We did also look at Bravely Default 2, but a lot of the ones in that one were ones we had already accounted for, or ones that were accounted for in other ways, or were ones that just didn't fit.
Yeah,
I believe it's kind of what I need to do at this point, but that was very bravely of you.
Boo!
One of us. I'm not alone.
ideally, you would stop that, Theo.
Oh no, you should keep doing it.
No. You will never hear me stop doing that. Like that's not an option. That comes with
You
the
guys
package.
missed it. Ideally, you should stop that. Or do I have to get Riona to be motherly to you?
No.
Okay.
There you go. The entire Lee family. Fuck off.
Do we have to break out the ball buster?
But Magnolia Arch isn't here, Monk.
No.
See, that's a joke that has layers. I could have been talking about that or God Hand.
You can do that at your leisure, if you will.
But getting back on the rails.
So,
Okay, sorry, rails. Yeah.
No, it's all good.
Yokai was obviously one of the big ones that was suggested.
Yep.
The other two I
as I was
believe
stating-
were Guardian, Exorcist, and Spirit Master.
and Arcanist.
Yes.
So as we already detailed, Arcanist works with playing with status effects, and Yokai, rather than casting big spells based on the 7 sins, embodies an Eidolon.
Mm-hmm.
But the three last ones that we all named, Guardian, Exorcist, and Spirit Master, are all independent jobs. Exorcist, we actually kind of went straight with. We have the undo and redo series of features.
As well as at higher level, and redo can be particularly nasty at higher levels.
Yep. Guardian, we didn't do the possession part of Guardian because that just doesn't fit in the system.
Mm-hmm.
But we did at least try to emulate part of it as a sort of you can share your soul link with an ally, so that when they take damage, you get soul power if you took the damage yourself.
We just
And then
didn't do a full soul gauge. Instead, we did charges.
Yep. 5 charges. It made more sense. It's easier to track and less finicky.
Besides, a lot of jobs that have limited resources within our system operate on a charge system, anyways.
Yep. Oh no, we did take one other from the Bravely series, I would say, Monk.
Which one?
Merchant.
Yeah.
Yeah, Merchant. Technically, most of this stuff looks like Bravely's Merchant, so.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you can throw your Gil. I wouldn't suggest it, but okay.
You can throw Gil, and you can pull random items out of your bag.
Yep. You can also get better bonuses regarding treasure, loot, stake, and lifestyle. Those are all systems having to do with how you get items and treasures and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent, now I can take over the Inner City Youth Community Center.
Excellent.
Yes. Anyway, I lost myself there. The Spirit Master, it maximizes on the whole fact that the Spirit Master in Bravely Default tried to prevent damage or give advantages against damage types and statuses. Obviously, we don't have something like fucking Stillness. Stillness in a TTRPG would be broken as shit. I mean, it's already broken as shit in Bravely Default. You could create if you manipulate your agility stats well enough, you can create a team that doesn't ever take damage.
Mm-hmm.
I should know. I've done it. I've built it. It's mine. You can't have it. It's mine.
Preemptively. Preemptively. I see.
But so the Spirit Master plays around with things like damage reduction and conditions and
shifting them
or reducing them or giving temporary vulnerabilities or reductions. It's still the same idea of the Spirit Master. It's just not as broken as it was in the video game. But yeah, those are the default and second jobs we used because they were the ones that we thought were mechanically interesting and fulfilled a specific class fantasy or job fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to our question about the importance of mechanical / niche thing there, yeah. Again, every job we picked that wasn't necessarily from Final Fantasy has a mechanical niche that fulfills some sort of cool idea.
Yeah. Now, after that is a more generic question asking about what we like about FF. Now, that's something that can fill an entire series of live streams. Also, I see what Gold had asked. The spellcraft abilities that the wizard had in the Bravely series, all of that is accounted for through our metamagic feats.
Yep. Changing how things attack and whether you can give them things like damage spiking.
Yeah.
Plus, there are class features that account for that too.
Mm-hmm. But in terms of the generic question,
yep.
For the purposes of this, I will simply say that there's always something new to explore mechanically because it is not set in trying to maintain a particular tradition for its own sake. And obviously, tradition for its own sake is something that I've been very critical over the years. There are multiple streams and multiple videos of me calling that shit out within certain communities. Some of them even have their own unfortunate nicknames. That and Zan and I did an entire episode of Geek Watch talking about how the state of sim racing is a cautionary tale in regards to that tradition for its own sake method of thinking.
Yep.
But consider that from 1 to 2, you went from a class-based Vancian-like model to a more skill-based model that was far more dynamic.
If you hit each other enough, you never got hit by anything else in the game.
Yeah, there's although I do have to point a certain hypocrisy in the sense that people give that system shit for how easily abusable it is, yet give the advancement system on skills in the Elder Scrolls a pass when they're the same fucking thing. And while I'm at it, let's also throw the Dragon Age stands under the bus as well. Sorry, Kay, but you count under this too. You and I heard endless amounts of shit about how overcomplicated and overwrought the Gambit system was. Then the tactics system comes out for Dragon Age Origins, and it's the same fucking thing.
I tell you all now, every one of you shitheads who naysayed and poo-pooed Final Fantasy XII because the Gambit system makes the game play itself. Fuck you and your love of Dragon Age Origins tactics system because they're the same fucking thing, and I swear to God, if you ever meet me at a con and try to say that to my face, well, first of all, you're gonna be getting a crick in your neck looking up that tall, and second of all, I will throw you. This will be competitive bitch tossing, and I'll throw you to Monk so he can pass you to the next tall motherfucker.
Ah, yes. I will join in, and we can score a 3-pointer.
Yeah. It could be worse. I could just throw them in a could just throw them in a dojo and have them spend 5 minutes with the murder grandpa, as Maki Ito learned the hard way earlier this year.
Remember, murder grandpa is the cutest wrestler in the world now,
Yeah,
officially.
and
Yeah.
I'm not going to dispute that.
I'll say it to his face. I'll straight up say it. Sekai ichiban kawaii to his face, because regardless of my horrible pronunciation, I'm sure he'll laugh at it.
Oji-chan, sekai ichiban kawaii.
Theo, I'm going to have to give you the skinny about Minoru Suzuki one of these days.
One of these days. Can I just mention something about the Final Fantasy that I personally find, like, just one thing? There's many things that I find really cool, but the one thing I find really cool is that, unlike any other long-standing genre-defining series, this one does not just, like, have that one thing narratively speaking, right? It has overarching themes, obviously. It has the similar eidolons. It has a lot of the similar beats to the stories when it comes to the worlds. However, it's not afraid to just fucking turn 180 on everything. We had classical, more or less traditional fantasy, early days Final Fantasy. Well, it was sort of traditional fantasy, but not really. You know, there was some elements. Yeah, there was still some elements of Skypunk and whatnot, but then it like took a completely different approach of like a technological post-modernization fantasy. Then it took a different approach. Then it took a different approach, and the ability to experiment is what makes Final Fantasy live. While a lot of other franchises have not lived nearly as much. I mean, have you ever seen a big budget franchise get 16 entries? I don't think so.
Closest one would be Dragon Age.
Well,
not Dragon Age,
Dragon Quest,
excuse me.
and
Dragon Quest.
I would actually say Dragon Quest is an example of what happens when you stick to when that tradition can be a double-edged sword. Because yes, for many years it stuck to a certain tradition, but the problem was games that were inspired by Dragon Quest started doing more experimenting and doing things that it wouldn't.
And then you got 11.
I would say we had a bit of branching out through 8, if only because that was done by level 5, and then we got further branching with 11.
Okay, well, I'm lying. There's also Shin Megami Tensei. That's also one of those series that have kept overtime for many games because it's such a weird ass series and does not stick to one single concept.
Yeah, the thing is that when 16 Zane and I have talked about this, but when 16 came out, there were a lot of people who were doing this big proclamation about how FF was returning to its high fantasy roots, and we were making very clear that that's not really a thing.
If you want to listen to that rant, there are multiple videos from around that time period where you hear me make this rant, especially when we shit on Dev from Short Fat Otaku for talking about JRPGs. Yoshi P in the JRPG video, and when we did that review. But the long and short of it is, Final Fantasy's roots are experimentation and iteration. That's it. The roots are rootless, as some might say.
Yeah.
There's no real roots per se. It's just there are certain anchors to what makes Final Fantasy, but there is no real root system that allows you to say, oh, this is the roots. This is what it means to be Final Fantasy. This and this and this and that. Not really. Again, there's chocobos, but chocobos are just like an animal. There's the primals thing. Yeah, sure, fine, fair enough. A few other like races and whatnot. Omega, I think. Omega weapon is surprisingly a reoccurring thing. surprisingly.
Omega and Ultima weapon.
Yeah, both weapons are surprisingly recurring, but they were all ultimately used. Ultimately, they all ultimately used in a different setting and in a different context to each other, which makes them kind of. It's just a recognizable name at this point, honestly.
Well,
Yeah.
and we went through a lot of interviews and the like to kind of nail that kind of thing down. And as CJ puts out Sid, which this might be a bit of a stretch, but one of these days, and maybe I'll do this in a campaign. I want to see the presence of a Cid who is more of a nod to the historical El Cid or El Campeador. I
Monk,
think the closest that we have is Sidolphus.
Monk, why don't you just tell them about the nightmare Sid you had created?
Yeah, and by the way, I actually have art for that now. I had commissioned a couple friends separately on this to create a version of Sid that was a combination of Sid from 7, from 4, although 14 could also work, and from Tactics.
And then for good measure, he also threw in Sydney.
Yes.
A nightmare Sid. This nightmare freakish creation.
Ah, yes, a seed of nightmare.
Yes.
And let me share with you the result. Well, one of the results.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even suggest doing a double-ended spear like that. That was their idea.
It is
a good
one of
idea.
the more interesting ideas.
And I shouldn't. I see that Riona had put Don Sidote. No, if there's anybody who's closest to Don Quixote, it's Gilgamesh in some cases.
Gilgamesh from 5, not from 14.
And CJ brings up 12 Sid. No. No. If we're I don't think I draw too much from Sid channeling Ric Flair 1988.
Heh.
And how could I not bring that up given the entourage and his glasses?
Yep.
But
as for what I like about Final Fantasy, there's an entire page in the first chapter. You you can read that when it comes out.
Yeah.
Nice. I guess you have to sit down with that idea.
Moving on. We've got 2 questions from Gold Zephilian.
Zellian.
Zellian. So first is, how open-ended is character creation? As in, how many choices do you reasonably make, and how deep are they?
Oh, that's good. It's a good thing that I have the character creation chapter open or something. I mean,
yes.
There are 8 steps in the broad outline of character creation. The first is to choose your ability modifiers. Then you choose your race. Then you choose your class. Then you choose your jobs. Then you choose your skills and interests. Then you choose your feats. Then you choose your equipment. And step 8 is the finishing touches, such as getting all of your derived stats, essentially, as well as things like your resources, spell slots, etc.
Yeah.
As for the types of choices you make, ability modifiers, you get to choose one of 3 stat arrays: generalist, specialist, or versatile. These are going to be put in as modifiers for the 6 abilities: vigor, agility, vitality, which are the 3 physical abilities, and mind, spirit, and persona, which are the 3 mental abilities, or magical abilities in most cases. Race is actually fairly important as well. It gives you your origin skill, which is a skill where you'll get your full character level as a bonus to your skill rolls with that skill.
Your character level affects all of your skills, but depending on whether it's untrained, trained, or origin, determines their rate of advancement.
Yep.
Untrained, you get it equal to 1/4 your level, rounded down. Trained is half level, and origin is level. And for the most part, you're only ever going to have one origin skill. There are ways to get more than one, but they are very rare.
Yep. And then the other things that choosing a race gives you, though, is you get to choose an ability modifier from a list of modifiers shown that will give a +1 modifier to that specific ability. You also have bonus feat categories that you can choose a single bonus feat from based on your race.
And that's something we should note. We have all of our feats categorized.
Yes. Feats are categorized. There are also... Oh, hey, that is a change we forgot to make. Hold on. There we go. We forgot to change the one race back to Burmesians, Matt, in the character creation chapter.
Oh, whoops.
It's okay. I changed it just now because I'm the editor-in-chief. Hi.
Each race also has one or two exclusive
racial
features.
Feature. Yep. For example, the dwarves, they have a racial feature, tunneler. When making skill rolls while underground, you roll twice and take the higher result. There are also some races with optional racial features. Using dwarf again, when making treasure rolls to add to your stake, you may reroll any ones rolled, but you must take the new result.
The reason why some of these are optional is because they're either more situational or they're more narrativist, such as say the code of the heraldry for elves, or Elvon, I should say.
Yeah. But these all will these all will change the way that your character gets certain things. It's to help shore up your package in certain ways. The next step, which choose your class, obviously choosing your class and the 3 jobs that come with it are going to be massive for you. That's going to give you all your features and stuff. But what
your
it also
class
does
is your chassis.
Yeah. Your combat class specifically determines how much HP and MP you get per level, how many trained skills you have, what your physical combat modifier and mental combat modifiers will be, and what your area of expertise is described as. As we discussed earlier, warriors are best at physical combat, experts are your skill monkeys, mages are your magical combat, and adepts have a hybrid feature setup.
Yes. Because of that, I do not advise anyone pick adept as their class for their first time. Because of the fact that it's meant to be a little more mix and match than the other 3. It is going to have a slightly higher floor.
Yep. Now, choosing jobs, as we've also discussed, there are jobs associated with every class, as well as the independent tracks, and one of the rules is that once you pick your class, at least one of your jobs must come from that class's association. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be put in your fast track. You can put that job in any of the tracks you want, but you have to have at least one job from that class. And these are exceptionally important. They're going to give you all of your fun little features. They're going to determine what spell lists you have access to. They're going to determine what cool things you can do. They're going to determine what role you might take in combat. All things depending. There's also the optional rule we discussed earlier called full buy-in. This is also taken from Legend System.
Mm-hmm.
You lose some magic item slots in your advancement track to get a second medium track for a fourth job. So you lose the ability to attune to some magical items while gaining an entirely new set of job features, a new package.
Mm-hmm.
It's a trade-off. That's another thing that we thought was very important in the system: risk versus reward.
Yeah. Because is it possible that somebody could pick black mage, white mage, and red mage and be able to be able to do a whole lot of stuff with all the damn magic? Yeah, you could certainly do that, but you're probably also going to make yourself a little bit squishy.
A little bit squishy, but if they're in the back row, they're probably doing just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's another thing. Combat is theater of the mind for the most part. It's abstracted into front row, back row. We just felt that was thematically better than anything else we could have done.
That and
Final Fantasy does not suit itself to grid-based comment easily.
Yeah, and I know that there's been grid-based affairs in the tactics games and their adjacent stuff, but that's one entry that's specifically built around that concept. And truth be told, I find that implementing a lot of the games don't really utilize it, and I felt that if we did use grid-based affairs where you have to deal with certain ranges, that would create more questions, and we'd like to minimize the kind of questions that get brought up in this sort of thing.
And so after that, you choose your skills and interests. Now, you obviously choose your skills based on your class and your mind modifier. Warriors get 2 plus mind modifier, experts get 4 plus mind modifier, mages get 2 plus mind modifier, and adepts get 3 plus mind modifier for trained skills.
Mm-hmm.
And that determines which of the 7 skills you'll be trained in. You cannot have something trained that is already an origin. The origin will supersede it.
Mm-hmm.
Does this mean that with the right mind modifier, somebody could have training in all of the skills? Yes. Is that a bad thing? No.
Definitely doesn't sound like a bad thing.
Yep.
There's always should be a person in the party, I think, that has like a lot of specialized overpowered stuff in some way. Overpowered is not always bad, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The skills all have an ability modifier associated to them. There's 2 for every skill, and when you're using the skill, you're going to use the higher of the 2 ability modifiers. If there's a tie, you can choose whichever one between the 2. But for example, misdirection uses agility or mind. If your agility is higher, you're going to use the agility modifier, not the mind modifier.
Mm-hmm.
We also get interests, which are a sort of way to use knowledge as a skill roll.
We did not want knowledge as a typical skill, because from my own experience, knowledge skills end up creating skill bloat.
Yeah. And essentially there are 3 broad categories of interests: affiliations, studies, and languages. And we, of course, have a list of examples, but clearly you could expand upon them. some example affiliation interests would be the army, city watch, street gangs, tribes, religious orders. Studies would be things like agriculture, espionage, magic items, safe cracking. And languages could be, dialects, racial languages, encrypted codes, hand signs. We even have monster languages. So this is a chance to kind of personalize your character in a way that can be mechanically significant, but can also be just as narratively significant.
Yeah.
And we really wanted there to be a marriage between narrative and mechanical whenever we could.
And
so
it should be noted each of these interests combines together to the formula that creates the knowledge skill check that you'd use. So if you have a particular interest, you're not rolling that as a check. You're rolling knowledge, and if an interest happens to apply, you're getting a bonus to that roll.
Yep. And the modifier is equal to your mind or spirit, whichever is higher, plus half your level. Now, step 6 was starting feats. You get basically 3 feats at character creation, 1 from your race and 2 from any of the categories. The categories are basic combat, melee combat, ranged combat, environment, equipment, fortune, skill, social, spell casting, and subterfuge. There are some subcategories within these feats, and they are things that are a little more specialized. That's covered in much more detail in the feats chapter. We have also, from I believe Fantasy Craft, taken the idea of a feat chain, which is a feat that essentially upgrades as you take the next level in it. They're indicated by Roman numerals in the feats, and you have to take them in order. In order that to know that you have that specific type of feat progression, rather than I have to take cleave and then greater cleave and then a couple of other things.
Once again, I'll bring up the bullshit that is whirlwind attack.
Exactly.
I know I keep bringing up a lot, but that's because it's such a perfect encapsulation of this false choice problem. Because all that it is just doing a spin attack like you'd see in any Legend of Zelda game since A Link to the Past.
Yep.
But the amount of stuff that you have to do in order to get it is excessive.
Yeah.
Like there's 7 prerequisites that it has.
Which means that by the time you get it, not only is it not useful to you, you didn't get to live out the fantasy you wanted to live out.
Especially since there's already mages who are going to be wiping the battlefield with just a couple spells, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yep. Now, hold on. How did I miss this one? This one needs to be italicized.
Yep.
I am even now I'm editing things we missed on passes. I feel bad. Step 7 is choosing your equipment, and this isn't just choosing equipment. This is you are building your equipment because of the customization system we have regarding weapons and armor, which is also inspired by Legend Systems equipment system. You create your primary weapon by choosing your weapon's metatype, your weapon's templates, and 3 of the tags available for weapons to create your own special weapon. The weapon's metatype determines whether your weapon attacks physical defense or attacks magical defense, essentially whether your weapon is physical or arcane. The weapon's template determines 2 things, whether you're, actually 3 things, excuse me. Whether your weapon is ranged or melee, which of course affects where you can attack in battle. Whether what your weapon's damage die is, and then finally what your weapon's extra effort threshold is. And the extra effort threshold is an extra effort mechanic where the more your accuracy roll exceeds the opponent's defenses, the more extra effort dice you get.
These with a few rare exceptions are usually D4s. Yep. Lighter weapons can generate these D4s easily. Heavier weapons deal more base damage, but have a harder time generating extra effort.
Yep. And there are some classes that play around with spending your extra effort dice in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So look forward to that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you create your armor the same way. You choose a meta type, a template in your tags. The meta type determines, again, whether it adds a bonus to your physical or magical defenses, or what it adds the larger half of your bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe it does full level and then half level.
Yeah.
And template determines. No, it was template that determined whether it did full level or half level, because heavy armor was full level and the light armor was half level.
Yes.
It just the meta type just determines where the bonus is applied, which defense.
Mm-hmm.
And the tags, of course, are once again custom tags that do extra things. There is a note on the weapon, and this ties into the fighter job. If you begin play with the first circle feature of the fighter job, meaning you chose the fast track or the medium track for your fighter job, you create additional weapons as appropriate, because the fighter is the man who can weapon every weapon. We heard you like attacking, so we put weapons in your weapons so you can hit while you hit.
The analog that I used as the template for the fighter is Firion's appearance in Dissidia.
Yeah. And you also get to determine what consumables you're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
At first level, you may choose 3 lesser tier consumables and 2 greater tier consumables.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, getting consumables at higher levels are found in advancement. You may have as many individual uses of these specific items in the aforementioned slot, but the number of unique items available is limited to this slot. What this means is, let's say you assign potion to one of your lesser consumable slots. You can use potion ad nauseum, ad infinitum, but it takes up a unique slot. So you could, if you have 3 lesser slots and you want to say add potion, ether, and one other lesser level consumable, there you go. Those slots are taken.
Yeah.
You can no longer add lesser tier consumables.
Your consumable slots should be aiming for variety, as opposed to doubling down on one particular item type. And this is even more important if you pick the chemist, who has more slots.
Yes, the chemist is someone who plays around with items like they're candy.
Mm-hmm.
Then you determine your resources with your number of loot slots being your highest unlocked job circle plus 1, which at level 1 is going to be 2.
Loot slots are basically the unique loot items that you can bring bring with you that you can bring from a adventure.
An adventure, yeah. Essentially, when you find something cool that you want to keep as treasure or a stake or anything else, it's gonna take up a loot slot.
Yeah.
And then excess is converted straight into stake.
Yes. And stake is the equivalent of gil, I could say, but the thing is that you do have to, whenever you're acquiring items at like a store, you do have to roll that, and you can spend stake to make that roll easier.
Yep. We abstracted currency simply because that fits the system better with what we've designed.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same reason we don't have long ass item lists, because not only with the weapon customization would that be asinine, but what items do we include, and what items do we issue.
Mm-hmm.
You also have starting resources of 8 plus half your level rounded down to the minimum of 1. So again, at first level, you're going to have a starting resources of 9. Your stake is equal to 2 plus your level plus your persona modifier times 2. And this is the stake you start with at the amount of. This is the stake you start with at the beginning of an adventure if the current stake that you have is lower. If the current stake that you have is higher, you don't start with that amount. You start with whatever you had that was higher. Your lifestyle stat is your persona modifier plus your highest unlocked job circle. So that will vary even at character creation depending on what bonuses you put into persona, if any. Then, of course, we already talked about the consumable slots. And then for spellcasting jobs, you need to determine your spell slots. And the number of your spell slots are equal to your magical combat modifier, plus you get an additional slot every 4th level, unless you have your class as mage, in which case you gain a new spell slot every 2nd level.
Now, you might ask why spell slots would be important if you're not playing as mage. Well, they can be filled up by either spellcasting, i.e., having a spellcasting class, and you will have more potential spells than you can carry with you. This isn't the Vancian model. These are the equivalent of equipment slots. You don't have a certain number at each spell rank. These are just the total number of spells you can bring with you. And once again, there's an exception because I believe it's the scholar can get extra slots.
The scholar has the grimoire. Yeah.
Yeah. That said, if you acquire certain scrolls, they would fall under the spell slots. If you acquire items that do spell-like effects but are consumables, those obviously would be consumables.
Yep. And then the highest rank of a spell you may equip to a spell slot is equal to the highest unlock circle of that spell list's associated job. For example, if your highest unlock circle in Black Mage is 3, you can equip 3rd rank and lower black magic spells.
Or you can cast them at 3rd rank.
Yes.
Because remember we'll get into that when we get into spellcasting.
Yes. Spells gained as loot are exempt from that rule.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing about this is you learn spells as you level up, but you cannot carry more spells into adventures than, that spell slot value. And then, of course, we do have a note, again, about scrolls. Scroll-type items may be used in spell slots, even if they do not have the appropriate job. This means that characters with no jobs that grant access to casting types may still use magical effects at a limited capacity. And so that right there, those are all the meaningful choices you make during character creation. And it's going to determine how your character grows and how... you're going to determine how personalized your character is that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I see that there's a follow-up question from Gold here. What of the 50-plus jobs are your favorites?
Do you have any idea how little that narrows it down?
Yeah,
what
probably.
Of the 50-plus jobs aren't my favorite?
Do you have any idea how little that narrows it down?
Yeah. If you put me at gunpoint, 1 for each job type, I'm gonna go samurai for warrior. I'm gonna go covert ops for expert. I'm gonna go yokai for mage. I gotta go Dark Knight for adept. Sorry, fuck you all. Dark Knight is my jam. And for independent, I'm gonna throw you for a loop, and I'm gonna go Magitech Knight.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Magitech Knight.
That was one that ended up going through a redo. Originally, it was going to be akin to the platforms from 6, but then I decided, you know what? We already have the Weapon Master as does more with weapon tags. Let's do that for the Magitech Knight, and then it evolved into this customizable power armor.
Yep, it has shield charges and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Magitech Knight's cool as shit.
Who doesn't like the ability to use a big ass power armor as a class?
I am a mecha fan. Riona knows this. Riona and I are soulmates when it comes to mech shit. So
Yeah.
Also,
Oh, yeah,
fuck
same.
you all.
Mechas are amazing. I've been enjoying the recent rise of popularity for mecha series. Uh,
I enjoy it because I get to show Gigak his own ass.
Yeah, we shit on Gigic every time mecha does well.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Monk? One job from every class and the independent list.
Okay. For warrior, I'm gonna go with fencer.
Yeah, he's not going to play his gimmick this time, people.
No, that'd be a little bit too obvious. Although I do like what we've done with the monk.
We just created Sabin. That's all we did.
The if I want to be pedantic, it's more like we created the custom combo system from Alpha 2. But
Yeah.
the reason I go with fencer is fencer in say Tactics Advanced was just a warrior for Vieira's. But instead, I decided to build it all around the "I challenge you to a duel" kind of thing.
Fencer is our troll physical combatant. I swear to God.
They're all about forcing a single opponent into a duel where both of them get bonuses against each other and penalties against everybody else. They're also a dodging little shit.
Yep.
Honestly, touche.
Yeah, for expert, I'm going to actually say gambler because I like
that answers a question that's on the sheet later on down the line.
Yeah, because a lot of games that have done a gambler like approach have tried to one-for-one replicate the reels, and I felt that and because of that it ends up being a bit bloated.
Yeah.
Because you're basically recreating a slot machine and recreating all the combinations you can get with it.
Yep.
Instead, we took the approach of you roll a bunch of dice. You're looking for either sets or straights.
Yep. You're playing rummy with your dice essentially for those
Yeah.
who don't get it.
It starts at 5d12 and it gets lower as you develop because a lower range means it's easier to get one or the other. There's also the fact that an important part of being the gambler archetype is not just the whole gambling part, but also knowing when to cheat. Because one anime I am very, very fond of is Akagi, the genius who descended into darkness. And with that, you have somebody who's playing Reach Mahjong who has a mixture of balls of steel and occasional cheating in ways that he's able to get away with because his opponent can't do shit, or it's already too late.
I hate Riichi Mahjong.
I love and hate it.
The Yakuza games have made me hate Riichi Mahjong.
I played a PC version of Reach Mahjong and got my ass kicked every time. That made me hate it long before I picked up Yakuza. Because Reach Mahjong is complicated. I'll phrase it like that for the purpose of brevity. But the point is that you look at any gambler character in fiction, and it's not just about them being lucky, but knowing when to cheat. And they can and will cheat. I was also channeling a bit of the huckster archetype from Deadlands, who is all about gambling with spirits and
actually that does follow the patterns.
Yep.
Monk is warrior, black mage is mage. I think the only thing you're missing is an expert. But blue mage is an adept, and Magitech Knight is an independent. So you've got four or five there, Riona.
And
they're all from different classes too.
Yeah. As far as mage, This one I'm torn on because on one hand I want to pick Ravager because Ravager is spell Daka. They don't cast high levels. They don't cast high rank spells. They just cast a lot of shit.
They cast a lot of shit at you very quickly. I hope you have an umbrella.
Yes.
It's raining spells. Hallelujah. Okay.
But the other one I was considering was Sage.
Because you want to be Tella?
That's pretty much what it is. He's all about being able to use random shit that he normally can't.
Yep.
Although I will note, instead of a time mage, we rechristened it Cosmic Mage, because what's time about throwing meteors at people?
Mm-hmm.
You spoony Shan.
But for adept, I'm actually gonna go with illusionist because I really like the gimmick we gave with it. I mean, the closest we had to illusionist was green magic in 12, but for us, illusionist is the trap caster.
They have the ability to cast magic as veils, which activate in response to things rather than casting them outright. Though they can still cast them outright if they'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
And then independent monk.
As far as independent goes, I am actually going to go with Gunbreaker because I like how we handled it. Taking the extra effort system we have and taking a few cues from Tenra.
Yep. So at this point, what the monk has built is the trolliest troll that ever did troll.
Well, if I wanted to be the trolliest troll, I would have picked Arcanist as mage.
No, you see, if I wanted to be the trolliest troll monk, I probably would go fighter, covert ops, and then yokai, and then ninja, and then for shits and giggles, exorcist.
Except with yokai, you've got to answer the question which Eidolon.
Alexander, because everybody must face my holy judgment.
Yeah, that's something we need to make clear when it comes to yokai. Yokai is the only job that can be taken more than once, because each time it's taken, you pick a certain Eidolon that you can assume an avatar form of.
Now, the corollary to this, you may be asking, well, then why can't I take Summoner multiple times? Well, you don't need to take Summoner multiple times. Each circle you get to choose a new Eidolon.
Summoner is one of our jobs that it has Summoner as a companion instead of a big fuck off spell.
Yes, you're not just summoning something and throwing it at the enemy. You're pulling it. Think of it more like Summoner from 14, actually, with the eggies.
Yeah, 14 and 11 would be more on point.
14, 11, and 10.
Mm-hmm.
But each circle, you gain an additional Eidolon at each unlocked circle, but may only have one Eidolon active at any time.
Mm-hmm. And
switching between your acquired Eidolons is an action. So out of our 18 Eidolons, yes, we have 18, you get 7 of them. You get over a third of them. And just so everybody knows what Eidolons are in the game, we have Alexander, Bahamut, Carbuncle, Cerberus, or Kerberos as properly pronounced. Fuck you all. Diabolos, Eden, Garuda, Gilgamesh, Hades, Ifrit, Knights of the Round Table, Leviathan, Odin, Phoenix, Ramu, Shiva, Siren, and Titan.
And most of them are going to work like one would expect. Eden almost got cut until I started studying Eden's appearance in 14, and I started to develop a theme to work with.
Shin Shiva writer, but I'm my own little hopper.
Oh. I didn't know you were a Kemi.
Hopper one. What?
But the thing, the only ones that really got changed was the only one that really went through any extensive amount of change from some of the source material is Diabolos, because I'm gonna get this out of the way right now. The Demi and Gravisia and Gravity, those spells got cut.
Any fractional or percentage damage in general got cut.
Mm-hmm.
Because we determined that when it comes to those spells, they're swingy in a way that makes the game not fun over half the time. Like, sure, if the party has Graviga and can cut an enemy's HP by 75% each time, they're gonna feel fucking awesome. But what happens when a monster has that and uses it on you, and you're the one who loses 75% of your HP in a single go?
Yeah, that's not exactly something you can control in terms of how it will affect the game, because one moment you are going down a fight that goes well, and the other one you just one shot a character, and that's just not particularly fun. Doesn't sound particularly fun for both the GM and the player involved, honestly.
And seeing is saying, did the level X spells, death spells also get cut?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The level-based, percentage-based, fractional damage, all of that. Anything that's kind of too random or too swingy to be feel good, that it takes control away from the players in a way, that it removes agency, we don't like it. We want you to be able to play risk versus reward, but we want those risks and those rewards to be the result of your choices.
It's also important to mention that we have 9 ranks of spells, but only a handful of spells are set in terms of rank, and those are usually the highest tier of spells.
And rank 8 and 9 spells have to be learned through an item that you have to basically quest for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Also, side note, Dragon asks, is there a common rider-like class? I think the closest one would probably be Magitech Knight, wouldn't it?
Magitech Knight, definitely. Kamen Riders are, by nature, people who transform into...
I mean, hold on. I've got it. Yeah. I've got it. Depending on the common rider, you're going to need to be a warrior class, and you're going to need to have at least Dragoon and Magitech Knight, because you got to have jump for the rider kick, right?
Yeah, right. You're right. You're correct. That's the jump kick. That's important. Dragoon for hops and Magic Armor for the armor. Speaking of, can I share my favorite jobs? Because I did read a lot of them.
Go for it, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My favorite jobs for each, the same rules apply to you all. One per type. When it comes to warrior, I think my favorite one. I'm not being original here, samurai. I just love the aesthetic of the job, and I love the. Well, I was always really a big fan of the EI / kind of approach to things, and
we do have EI strike in it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Monk, this is. I have to bring this one up because this is another time I got to correct the monk. Samurai at second circle has EI strike. It reads as, when you make an attack, you may instead roll a single d20 rather than your normal attack roll. If you roll a natural result equal to or greater than 20 minus your character level divided by 2 rounded down, you instantly reduce the target to 0 HP. If not, the attack automatically misses. That used to just say a natural result equal to.
Yeah.
And it made it. I was like, "Did you intend for EI strike to be only a 5% chance?" No.
I wanted it that there's a high rate of failure early on, and it's something that is going to become a menace late game.
Yeah, level 15. Suddenly, a 12 and up is going to make you kill things instantly.
And and I see that he's bringing up about whether Amazon had a writer jump. That is going too far into the weeds. I've seen this a lot when people try and make Kamen Rider TTRPG or Sentai TTRPG. You shouldn't be hyper focusing on replicating what's already existed. Otherwise, you're going to be eternally playing catch up. That's why we designed the weapons the way we did, because we knew that it may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen in a month or a year or 5 years or a decade. But some game in this franchise or in another franchise is going to come up that has just as much of a cool factor as when people saw the Buster Sword for the first time in 1997, or when people saw the Dragon Slayer for the first time in Berserk, or when people saw lightsabers for the first time in 1977, or when people read about the Shard Blades in the Stormlight Archive, which everybody should fucking read, and along with a good chunk of Sanderson stuff, because the man's one of the few who's crazier than me in terms of his work ethic.
Interesting.
It's important, and that particular weapon with that particular cool factor, somebody's going to bring up, how would I do it in this game? And you see this a lot with games that have a set weapon list but don't really have a way to create custom weapons, where the answer is just homebrew it.
Yep.
Which is going to happen eventually, but you can make it easier on people.
I think we've gone a little off into the weeds here.
Yeah,
why don't you continue, Theo? What's your expert job selection?
Yes, expert job. I'm an engineer, honestly. I'm a big fan of the Magitech and tech part of things. I'm a big fan of all that stuff.
And I like the idea of having a little robotic buddy.
Yeah, I like turrets. I like robots. I like all of that stuff that I like to. Ultimately speaking, I think it adds a layer of strategy to your setup, because this makes you have a setup to begin with, right? You have to prepare and do stuff in advance and tune it up a little bit. I would imagine this one pairs well with Mechanite.
Yeah.
A lot of the jobs will pair very well with each other.
We made that intentional. We want the jobs to synergize.
Yep.
This also means that if somebody says, how would I do X character in Legend Edition, there's no one way to do it.
I mean, no one way to do it, but we've certainly at least got some suggestions.
Yeah.
Right, Matt? With that entire 2 pages? Oh,
yeah.
Actually, Matt says he has to head out here soon.
Yeah, no worries, Matt. Thanks for swinging in.
Yep. But Matt has made a really cool page spread of how you might make certain people from Final Fantasy in our system, actually.
Like Sephiroth.
Time for coming, Matt.
Yep. Nope. But I will note with the engineer, I was channeling a little bit of Two Fort Engineer, because how do I stop some mean Mother Hubbard from staring me a structurally superfluous new beehive? The answer: use a gun. And if that don't work, use more gun.
Not more gun. Use bigger gun. That's the. I think that's that's the biggest answer. Anyway, mage. When it comes to mages, I think necromancer.
He's going for a companion build, Monk.
Yeah, I'm companion building here. I wanna have an army. I wanna have an army. Not even an army. I wanna have a situation where someone says to me, my character, "You stay watch, right? You stay watch," and I have to stay here for like a prolonged period of time. What I will do is I will summon my undead minion. I will have my robot body. We will get Yu-Gi-Oh, and we will play. Just sit there and play cards.
I should note that you can't have more than one companion active, regardless of your build.
Sure, but at least I'll have one or the other play Yu-Gi-Oh with me.
I mean, come on, Monk. For roleplay purposes, he can have all of his companions to talk to. It's just in combat, only one can be active at a time.
I will note that I put a sidebar called "Am I Evil?" which, yes, is a is a Diamond Head reference.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make clear that necromancers don't necessarily have to be villainous characters.
Well, of course.
And
I mean, anyone who's seen the Gray Necromancer green text story about D&D knows about that.
No, it's like necromancers are ultimately it's just a science of death.
Well,
It's not that. Yeah,
in
effectively.
ancient times, it was a form of divination.
Yeah, exactly.
Necromancers are just healers who are a little too late.
Yeah, exactly. They're just a little. They're just like my dad.
Yeah.
They just play it.
God
Okay.
damn it. But
All right. So,
what did you pick for Adept?
Adept. I think I'm gonna go with that's hard. Sword Saint. Honestly,
Sword Saint's a good one.
Sword
Sword
Saint.
Saint's a good one.
Yeah, Sword Saint are the one I'm because but the aesthetic of it all is kind of like the ultimate focus on like so enlightened with the for someone who follows the path of the sword for some so into it that it's just like it gains a certain level of transcendence. I like that.
Yeah. Just so those of you who don't understand what the Sword Saint does, the Sword Saint essentially is a bit of a combo system without being a combo system. The martial flows use your concentration points to do things.
When you attack, dodge, or parry successfully, because you have two defensive options. you can do more than just take hits. You can attempt to remove or counterattack. If you successfully parry, you automatically counterattack.
Yep.
You gain 1 concentration point. You cannot have more than 5 concentration points. And these tie into martial flows, which have a passive and an active effect. And as you develop along the Sword Saint, you gain additional martial flows. But even with that, you can't have more than 1 flow active. The thing of how it works, and I'll use the first martial flow that you get, which is opening keen edge. Yeah. Each one has two. The passive thing that you get is the focus. The active is the unsheath. The focus, your attack rolls have a minimum roll equal to your concentration points. If you roll below this minimum, re-roll that die. Unsheath, your next attack is an automatic critical success.
But you still have to roll to determine how many extra effort dice you generate.
Yes. You're just treating it as a take 20. And you might say, doesn't that mean that you could just that as soon as you get concentration points instantly auto crit? No. You can only use Unsheath once you've gotten 5 concentration points.
Yep. And that means the maximum amount of concentration points, I might add. Mm-hmm. But the Sword Saint's really fun.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of playing around with like attack, unleash, then attack, then unleash, attack, and it's just like you need to kind of juggle around a lot of stuff. Well, not a lot of stuff, but a few things.
Yep. And then what about the independent job you're most interested in there, Theo?
Honestly speaking, I'm again not being original here. Magitech Knight.
Yep. Yep.
Nothing beats a big ass armor that you can pilot.
It's a power armor that you can customize. It gets shield charges. It's actually really nice.
Yeah, nothing beats it for me. Especially considering I really enjoy the idea that really immediately pops into my brain as soon as I look at the over this stuff is that I would like to play someone. It's just like off the top of my head. I would like to play someone who's like maybe somewhat ill. I'm getting inspiration from a peculiar game. If anyone here who knows it, they will understand what I'm referencing here. It's that a peculiar person who is otherwise trapped in this combat armor because this is also partially their life support system in a way. That'd be kind of cool.
This is a Nikkei reference, isn't it?
Not quite. It's a Star Rail reference.
Okay, close enough. I could have also said that you're making a dreadnought.
No, Monk. We're missing the best example of someone wounded where the mechanical armor they are in is their life support. Hello, Dingo. Hello, Zone of the Enders second runner. Hello, the fact that Jehuti is now your life support. I love Zone of the Enders. I wish we got a third game. Fuck you, Konami!
Yeah, although we technically do have second runner is the third game if you want to be pedantic.
The other game that you're referencing, Monk, while a very good game, is just Super Robot Wars Zone of the Enders style.
I am still technically correct.
The best kind, of course.
The best kind,
Yeah.
of course.
I will, since we brought up Gunbreaker, I will note one particular thing. Not all weapons that are treated as gun blades are gun blade, or rather gun arms in our system for the purposes of this.
So, what we wanted to do is a gun arm is a melee weapon that enhances its own damage through the firearm integrated into it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Not a weapon that is both a melee weapon and a firearm. That is a different weapon. So the revolver from Final Fantasy VIII is a gun arm. The Blaze Fire Saber from Final Fantasy XIII is a variable weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Which we have
Bullet
an enchantment
punch.
for.
Yeah.
Bullet punch. Monk, did we make a gun glove?
Let me.
I know we have gun tonfa.
We don't have gun tonfa. We have gun Qatar.
Close enough. Okay, they're punching daggers. Close enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I think we've gotten through our favorite jobs. Next question we have from Kunulakarai. I think I said that right. Will there be monster tracks like with the original Legend RPG? No.
No.
As we stated, our NPC creation system is unique. It is its own thing. It is separate from the character creation system, so they don't get tracks. Though part of the features you can give NPCs in our creation system is to give them job features from the jobs. We've given a few things that are supposed to have jump, which kind of makes them fucking ludicrous. But yeah, there won't be monster tracks.
No. Largely because, again, we didn't want to play Eternal Catch-Up. Especially since we already have monster categories, which is more of a subtype that grants a universal feature to everything in that category. But since we wanted customization, doing a monster track would have taken away from that. That being said, monsters, as mentioned before, can take job features. They can even take limit breaks, which we did something different when it comes to limit break systems. So
We'll get to that eventually, though.
Next are the 3 questions from Siegherz. First thing, forgive me if this is a strange question. Why would I forgive you? There's nothing to forgive about. There are no dumb questions, only inquisitive idiots. I know it's not typical of the Final Fantasy games to have faction systems or things like domain management, but as a new and fledgling DM, I desperately want to run a campaign that supports those gears in the Final Fantasy mythos. Will Legend Edition have any systems like that built in? If not, would borrowing rules from a system like Axe be cohesive? Let me answer this in two parts. We do have a faction system built into this. In terms of the fact that the loot that you can get, there's multiple ways that can be spent. Can you spend that on getting shit? Yes. You can also spend it on advancing on alignments that you have. And we have a few examples of that in the book. We have one example in the book, and there's going to be further in the Ultimania guide that I'm developing as a side thing. This alignment advancement, the closest analog I can think of would be the Grand Company advancements in FF14.
That sounds like a good reference, honestly.
Now, in terms of full-on domain management, we do have a housing system, but that isn't quite what I think you're going with that question.
This is a holding, more like a single building rather than a full domain.
Mm-hmm. Now that being said, I will appreciate that you brought up Adventurer Conqueror King system, but that wouldn't be my first choice in terms of integrating domain management with it, because the domain system in Axe is tailor-made for its sandbox. And while I like Axe, I don't think it quite fits what you're asking for. A better one to go with, in my opinion, would be Seeds of Wars. Now, full disclosure, the developers of Seeds of Wars have been on the show multiple times and will be in the future. I did do a review of the core books a few months back, and the reason why I picked Seeds of Wars is because of the fact that it is system agnostic. It's not tied to any particular RPG system. And it can be even run standalone if need be, which would make it an easier integration, as opposed to if you use the system in Axe, where you'd have to do a bunch of extra work because this domain system is very clearly tied to characters. And while at the same time being relatively simplistic. If you can handle managing domains in a 4X game, you can handle it in Seeds of Wars. And as I said, I've done a video covering it. That would be my suggestion. I think there's a few others that are in that agnosticism. Seeds of Wars is just one that I'm the most familiar with, and the one that I'm willing to endorse. I've seen some people argue Kingmaker, but the problem is Kingmaker is too tied to, well, Pathfinder, so you'd end up having the same problem in a different coat of paint. His second question is, will there be a quick start like FF4E's Chaos and Cornelia? At this time, we don't have plans to write a attached quick start. That may change in the future. It's just not a high priority right now. And
I'm not sure we'd really want to write one.
I might write it in the way that those one shots for Savage Worlds are written, or the opening focus strike format that's used in L5R's adventures.
Yeah, the reason I say we may not want to write one is just because of the fact that we want people to build in their own sandboxes. I feel like that we don't want to necessarily pigeonhole them.
The only time I would do that is for any setting that I end up writing myself.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably write a quick start for the Gaia setting once I finish editing that document. The Gazetteer.
Yeah, the Gaia Gazetteer. If only so we can showcase some of the insanity that came out of that, like say Roman themed elves, or the fact that every major nation has their own signature mecha.
or the fact that the Taru Taru are a thaumatocracy, a word I had to make up.
Who think that they have invented every form of magic.
Yes, ever.
Oh.
So,
Also, also the fact that you have a nation that has influences from both Xeon and the Lyran Commonwealth.
no, now thaumatocracy sounds cooler, Seekers. Thaumocracy just kind of sounds, eh. And yes, Riona is correct. I casted this. You know, the comic of I created this. Hold it for me. I created this.
Mm-mm.
But and then of course we already answered the question about there being a gambler type job.
Yep.
So now we go on to worrisome Baz. Baz,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen quite a lot in chat. His question is, are we going to have mimes? What about the more setting-specific mechanics, such as materia or espers? We do have a mimic job. The mimic job works a little differently than some might think. It's one of our independent tracks, and the mimic job allows you to temporarily copy and paste things from your friends, and sometimes even your enemies. For example, the limit break of the mimic is to use any limit break an ally has.
I think that's a good segue to talk about what we did with limit breaks, because we did something that hasn't been done in other FFTTRPGs.
Yeah. So limit breaks are still an emergency tactic. You have to be below 50% HP, wasn't it, Monk?
Yes.
Yeah. You have to be below 50% of your maximum HP.
Which is why there's the SOS part on the character sheet.
Yep. In order to use a limit break. What a limit break does for the 4 basic classes is to exemplify whatever the thing is they're good at as being even better at it.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I can get all the way back up to the top, the warrior limit break is action surge. For the remainder of the encounter, you may make a weapon attack without using your action. You may only benefit from this feature once per round. Essentially, you get to attack twice if you want to, or you get to use an action and a weapon attack. It's a way to make your ability to attack even better. With the expert, they get savant. For the duration of the scene, you gain a bonus to skill rolls and skill defenses equal to your level. So basically, it turns everything skill rolls and skill defense wise into origin skills.
Mm-hmm.
This bonus does not replace the modifier gained from trained or origin level skills, though. And then mage gets, I believe it was turbo MP.
Yep.
Yep. For the remainder of the encounter, each point of MP spent on modifying casting rolls counts twice, i.e. 1 MP grants a +2 bonus to the casting roll. This cannot be used for innate spells. And then for the adept, we get wild card, which allows you to use either action surge, savant, or turbo MP as your class limit break, because the adepts are the gishes between the other 3s.
Mm-hmm.
But the job limit breaks, the ethos we had behind that is this limit break breaks the job in a way that makes it do what it does absolutely on crack.
Yeah.
On steroids, on crack steroids.
And with some of them, we got a little bit cute with the names, like, say, the Necromancer's limit break.
Yes, the Necromancer's limit break. The friends on the other side. So I think my favorite though is still Lazuli Luxury for the Blue Mage. For the remainder of the encounter, your blue magic spells are cast at a minimum rank equal to the number of blue mage circles you have unlocked to the maximum of 6th rank.
Now, this is important because Blue Mage and Ninja fall under their particular spell lists fall under fall under the innate sub-rules that we have. Now, normally when someone's casting a spell, they declare in advance what level they're casting it at. With the maximum, obviously, we already talked about that. Innate is different. They make a roll, and they make the casting roll, and that determines what level they're casting at. On the plus side, they don't have to spend the 1 MP buy-in that normal magic has to.
Yeah.
So
there's a trade-off.
Yeah. This does mean that they're capped at sixth level, but there's a lot more RNG that can happen with their casting.
Yep. The I like another one of our cheeky names for Limit Break is the Oracle's Limit Break is named Seimei after Abe no Seimei.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cheeky. But so our Mimic, as we were saying, essentially borrows things from allies and sometimes even enemies. For example, counter Mimic. You may use a Mimic action upon a successful dodge or parry. Allows you to, use one of your mimicries.
Mm-hmm.
You can choose to treat an ally's physical defense or magical defense as your own with Defending Mimic. It's a very fun little class. Rather than miming the previous action that occurred, it mimics facets of a character in order to maybe fill in a gap somewhere.
Pocket pick.
Yep.
And it should be noted that the independent jobs are ones that are best suited for people who've gotten a little bit of seasoning, because when I say that they are equivalent to prestige classes, it's not in the prerequisite end of things, but in that they are more specialized and are going to ask for a bit more system mastery than the other jobs. There's a slightly higher floor.
They've got a higher skill floor.
Mm-hmm. Some of them higher than others. I'd say Mimic is on the higher end of the skill floor than some of the others.
Absolutely. Mimic is all of its mimicry is going to be extremely situational, so you need to know in which situations you need to use it.
Yeah. And both Mimic and Squires, their kit is going to be heavily dependent on the party composition.
Yep. As for the other half of the question, asking about systems such as Materia or Espers, which are systems from specific settings, we do have an 11th chapter for advanced rule sets, which those rule sets are all optional. They're like adding modifiers to the game. We have rule sets for cybernetics, item synthesis, but we do in fact have a setting for the Magicite system from 6, the Materia system from 7, Junctioning from 8, the Sphere Grid from 10. All of those are advancement type alternate rule sets. They change how character advancement works, all of them. We also, for example, have the tactical point and skill chain system from 11 as a modifier to combat. The digital mind wave from Crisis Core as another modifier to combat.
As a alternative to the limit break system.
Yep. We have the Elemancy magic setup from 15 for changing how spells work there and how you make them. And then we have the Warcasting setup from Type 0 for another combat variant as well.
Yeah.
So there are modules that we've provided with extra rule sets that you can use to modify the base game at your own discretion. So make sure you're ready for it when you do it.
And of course, with item synthesis, I do have to give a lot of credit to our brother Tanner, because a lot of it was heavily inspired by two things: the alchemist class in Sword World and his particular essence system for how he handles item creation and manipulation.
Yep.
Within Heavens and Heresies.
Yep. And then the final question we have from Baz, on at least the submitted questions: are we going to have a row system by default? I feel it gives a little more depth to combat without needing to touch a lot of other aspects. Yes, I did answer that earlier, but we do have the row system. It is an abstracted system, front row and back row, and where you are in reference to the enemy's front rows and back rows is going to determine whether your physical attacks or your weapon attacks, I should say, are going to be able to hit them or not. For example, a lot of ranged weapons can hit from the back row. Many melee weapons cannot.
Spells are the exception to this rule. They can hit from anywhere.
But that's because a spell is like a GPS satellite. It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, the row system is what we went with. As I said, it just felt closer to the soul of Final Fantasy, while at the same time keeping the game from potentially getting too bogged down in a grid or hex-based combat system. So
I know that somebody on the FF Tabletop Discord wants to do a more Ivalice like setup. I've merely stated I'm not going to stop you. I'm just going to warn you that you're going to be doing a lot of work when it comes to doing that.
Yep. Certainly nothing to stop you from homebrewing that on your own time. We just don't have we have no interest in creating that system ourselves.
There may be a time where I end up creating a game that is using a more grid-based affair, if only so I can throw it right back at the people who keep giving me shit about the edition I'm supposed to hate, but I don't because I'm not getting paid. But this isn't that kind of game.
Yep. And with that in mind, we've reached the end of all the submitted questions. So, everybody, you have any further questions for us? Please do let us know now.
Yep.
Submit your questions in chat.
Yep. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
And your peas. Nobody likes cooked peas. I like fresh peas.
Yep. You know what the difference is between roast beef and pea soup?
I don't pee in your soup.
Anybody can roast beef.
Yep.
But I will note I got a few people asking early on when we were developing this whether or not we'd do materia, and I had, for the longest time, I was against it because materia is something that's specific to 7, and I felt that when it came to materia, that is a freeform system, and we haven't really done that level of freeform since it has its own issues, which is why the advanced rules have a big at your own risk warning.
Yep. They are advanced rules. They are all optional, and you are using any and or all of them. I don't think you could use all of them at the same time at your own risk.
You couldn't. They would clash with each other.
Yeah, especially the advancement ones. Each one changes advancement in a fundamentally different way. So
yes. And when it came to materia, the version that you're going to end up seeing is going to be like the 7th variant that I did because I had a bunch of stop and start ideas. Now, Sieg does ask when it's out. So we don't have a set date beyond when it's done, but given the level of progress that we have so far, I would venture that we're shooting for a late summer release.
Late summer, early autumn is my best prediction. The way I see it, With the runs we're doing right now on the plain text documents, which is what we're working in, we're nearly finished. This rewrite run is rewriting a lot of fluff, essentially, so that it isn't something just straight copied from a wiki or whatever, which was just used as stopgaps regardless while we were still developing the system. Once that rewrite is done, we'll be going through on what I call the final editing pass, where we fine-tooth comb everything as a read-along to make sure that we didn't miss any T's, uncrossed T's, undotted I's, etc. Just to make sure that every little bit of minutiae is accounted for. Once that is done, myself as editor-in-chief, on the writing side of things, I'm done. I don't have anything else left to do. At that point, Nami and Matt will take over with taking the plain text documents and formatting them for the PDFs with the art styles and everything they've been going with. As for how long that will take, Matt did have to leave earlier, so we can't get a direct answer from him. I doubt he would have a concrete answer in mind because it would very much be a touch and go sort of thing for them as well. But I don't think it would take super long.
And as far as the page count, I doubt that it would be, and I doubt that it would be more than 300 pages. I'm thinking it's going to be 270.
I mean, Monk, you're forgetting the spellcasting chapter.
Monk just went silent.
You are forgetting the chapter that is 165 pages in Google Docs that takes a minute and a half to fully load.
I'm aware of that. I'm also aware of that the page count is going to significantly drop once we start putting things in the standard 2-column format.
Perhaps. Then again, we also have a bestiary that is 200 creatures long.
Yeah, but we've clearly had it set up where it's going to be 2 creatures per page. So
2 creatures per page, except for the 2 creatures Matt just showed us today. Or was it yesterday?
Yesterday, which since he isn't here, we can't. Should we bring that up, or
I think we should. I think we'll leave that one as a surprise for the folks at home.
Fair.
I think those are full page creatures, though. I'll put it that way.
Full page creatures, but they're built on a slightly different framework.
Yes.
And
but
that's
2 creatures per page is still 100 total pages, Monk.
Yeah. So it is going to be a beefy boy, but I don't think this is going to be Hero System 6th edition levels of beefy.
God, I hope not.
So do I, and I
hope not.
And I'm the one who spoke with Stephen Long about it.
Monk, another thing. Hopefully, we're not Gubat Bunwa pages of beefy either.
Well, we're not Gubat Bunwa because we're not needing to jump around when it comes to where things are.
True. Everything is in order as you read it on the fucking character creation page.
Also, we're not the closest thing that we're giving to any sort of lectures is the definition thing in chapter 1. And even then, the closest thing to that is the definition I submitted for defining what a TTRPG is.
And my page about what is Final Fantasy. But that page is
Well,
let's not read it off. I remember I told everybody at home that they're gonna have to read it if they want what I like about Final Fantasy. So
what I will read off is the definition of TTRPGs and the definition of video game RPGs that I had written out. Because I do think it's the most comprehensive definition I've been able to find.
Yeah.
When it comes to role-playing games, the one that I wrote was A role-playing game is a form of group storytelling with rules that dictate the mechanics of player success and failure. These rules enhance the experience in two ways. First, they make the story more compelling by providing concrete gauges of a situation. Second, they provide the player with a series of interesting strategic choices, turning the experience into a game. You'll note that I did not mention things like GMs or dice or minis or any of that, because none of those are completely necessary to the experience. And as far as the video game part, I had written a video game RPG. Although it uses game twice, but that's been the accepted word. Is a game that has strategic and tactical gameplay centered around creating and building a stronger character.
Yes.
And I also referenced Ralph Koster's book, A Theory of Fun, which anyone who has a passing interest in game design should read that book.
Yes.
I also find it a bit amusing. Whenever it comes to Ralph Koster, I can always bring up the whole Jedi incident, how he was strong-armed into putting Jedi in Star Wars Galaxies, even though he kept telling SOE that'd be a terrible idea. Which I could see some people say, well, Jedi are an iconic part of Star Wars. Why wouldn't you put that in a Star Wars MMO? Because Galaxies was a sandbox MMO, and everybody chasing Jedi would screw over the balance of things. Then he was forced to do it, and surprise, surprise, balance got screwed up. And everybody but him ended up doing surprise Pikachu face. But the big reason for a definition like that is whenever it comes to the definition of video game RPGs or console style, I've already talked about the whole JRPG thing. A lot of people waffle about with inconsistent definitions, and it has been asked of me why I am so specific on definitions, and I believe the reason for that is you have to understand the rules before you can break them. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to be classifying something as a thing, then that classification should be as consistent as we can make it. It's the same principle when it comes to the classifications of animals and how it's a contracting circle with each tier you go down. In terms of broader categories to smaller categories. And I don't see a reason why we can't do that when it comes to entertainment. Not to mention the other problem I've had with the term JRPG is you don't see that sort of national identifier in any other genre. Like a platformer that comes from the States or comes from the UK or comes from Japan, you don't hear J platformer any time, do you?
No, but we have much more in-depth videos about that, Monk.
I have an entire video called The Illusory Genre on that whole thing. And Yoshi P's comments about JRPG feeling exclusionary back in the day just validated what I was saying.
Yep. In that respect, though, I don't see any additional questions from anybody, so I do believe that that's everything we have.
That is everything we have.
Be.
There's possibly a few minor things I can talk about. I will note that while I am working on the Ultimania guide, that is not meant to be something that will be released in conjunction with the FF Legend core book. It is the equivalent of the first expansion, like the Storyteller's Guide in Exalted.
It's the first expansion. I see. Okay.
And it mainly contains a bit of advice and some reinterpreting of certain mechanics to accompany other aspects, like say there. That's where I put in airships, because at the time, if I was going to put airships in the core book, I'd have to figure out it wouldn't really fit the setting agnostic attitudes, since airships are something you're going to see in some FFs more than others. Dragon asked if anyone had done a race creator. I don't see a strong enough reason to do that, because aside from the racial ability, which there's no way to really quantify that, like say the race creator in Pathfinder or Savage Species in 3.5. There it's too we wouldn't really have anything that could do a race creator in anything that isn't just a ass pull. And even with that, we have the hybrid race, which is the equivalent of the adept in the form of it being a mix and match. So a dedicated race creator, we didn't really see the point. At least that's my take. Oh, who'd we?
I don't know if we lost anybody.
No, I'm not
I
seeing
think somebody just stopped watching the stream.
Or stopped watching the set of that.
Riona has, yeah.
Mhm.
Theo says he's heading up.
Yeah, stay frosty, Theo, and have a good night
All
on
right.
your end.
Yeah. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for vibing. I now understand. I might actually definitely run this game at some point.
I do
Alright, see you guys.
remember you talking about running this game with other VTubers, or dragging me along to run the game with.
Yep, I
with
will
other
definitely
VTubers.
either drag you along or do something along those lines with VTubers.
All right, man.
I'll see you guys around.
Yep, Theo, I'll see you on Friday.
See you on Friday. Bye.
I will note that same level of customization also applies to our magic item system.
Mm-hmm.
You have oh man, let me move Rion a little bit more to the middle. I didn't use the group version. I used the individual reactives.
Yeah.
But when it comes to magic items, I wanted that to be just as customizable. And in the name of that, magic items are on a 4-tier setup similar to consumables: lesser, greater, relic, and artifact. I may have gotten the last two flipped in my head. My apologies in that case. But each of them has a certain number of enchantment points, which you spend on advantages that you can get on the thing. There is a slight exception in the sense that the Crown's Guard gets a scaling magic item, which is going to be their astral armament. That one has a higher point threshold. Again, within a lot of the job design, there's a mindset of what are you better at, and since Monk was asked about, I may as well get into that. It is heavily inspired by the Monk designed in 13th Age. Because the approach that it's doing is it is doing a combo system, but it's more of you rolling 3d20s, and each hit that you get gets you a stronger secondary effect. You're not dealing damage multiple times. But those hits gain you chakra points, which you spend on mudra. So you do kind of have a nice little closed loop. You use blitzes to get chakra. You spend chakra to do mudra, then you refill chakra, and of course chakra goes up to 7 because I wanted to keep some things on point. And it is funny that a few classes we took inspiration from 13th Age because, well, of what happened during that other emergency Valley of the Judge than what's going to be happening on Tuesday. But I should know because of that hyper focus. If you pick Paladin but you don't pick White Mage, you're not getting White Magic. If you want White Magic, pick Red Mage or pick White Mage.
Yep.
Or take a few White Scrolls.
Yep.
Paladin instead is more about cover. That and their weapons always doing holy damage. Even if the weapon would do other types of damage anyways.
Mateus, you are at the tail end here. We've answered all the questions and are about to sign out, actually.
But since we had talked about our favorite jobs, I think we can go into some of our favorite feats. Obviously, there's a lot. So for the purposes of our sanity, I think we can pin it down to 1 per category.
Okay.
For me, as far as basic combat, I would say, just a scratch.
I can see that one.
Tis but a scratch. A scratch? Yep. Your arm's off.
For me, it's betraying luck, for sure.
Mm-hmm. For melee combat, crashing wave.
Yeah, I can see that.
That would go especially well if you're playing a dervish.
Fling.
Yep.
I'm gonna hit a motherfucker with another motherfucker.
I have Jeremy to blame for why I put fling in.
Yes.
When he had said that improvised weapons could you could use somebody as an improvised thrown weapon. When that came up during Planet Bound.
Mm-hmm.
For ranged combat, I would say, probably spray and pray.
Let me think here. Crack shot.
Yeah. Your rate for the purposes of targeting, your ranged attack is considered 1 template higher. It doesn't mean you do more damage. It just means you've got wider possibilities of who you can shoot at. So you could snipe from the back with a pistol.
Mm-hmm.
We only have 4 feats for environment, but we do have a bunch in the ambush subtype, which is all about advantages that you can get when you
target an account with someone who has a lower initiative than your own.
Mm-hmm. I see Patrick Barnes saying, "I've always wondered if the monk theme was purely entertainment."
I don't think it's purely entertainment.
Mm-hmm. But if I'm including the ambush feats, then I'd say spring trap.
I can see that. I I would do tank busting.
Yeah. Ranged attacks against opponents who have a lower initiative than yours generate more extra effort die. Very nice.
Yep.
He says, as an actual Benedictine monastic, I am curious. Okay, okay, that I. Okay.
The way with your monk motif is because of the whole bestowing wisdom and being of counsel aspect of what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh. Let's see. As far as equipment feats, um, I would say, I would say armored strike.
I could see it.
Because
I'd
well,
take pack rat.
yeah,
Extra loot, man. Extra fucking loot.
we've all had that pack rat tendency in playing certain CRPGs, and cursed whoever decided to put encumbrance rules in that particular game. And well, anybody who plays any Elder Scrolls game is automatically a pack rat.
Yep.
Let's see, as far as fortune, I would say burst of speed.
Mine's bounty hunter.
Yeah, I could see that, and bounty hunter has a whole lot of roleplay potential since that one, I will admit, was a bit inspired by our time with Veil of the Void, because the bounty hunter in that one has a bounty list.
Yep.
Oh.
But the reason for bounty hunter is if you kill thing, you get full stake from it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't kill it, if one of your allies kills it, you still get half stake from it.
So you don't have to worry about kill steals or
Yep.
kill confirms.
Well, I mean, kill confirms still jip you of half of it, but half is better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. But for the skill feats, I would say Joker's Wild.
Yeah, I can see that one. Mine is knowledge is power.
Substitute your knowledge skill in lieu of the skill normally used to target a skill defense.
Yep.
And then for social, which we only have a handful of, I would go with retcon.
I knew you would too.
It's like,
Me, I'd go with room and board.
yeah.
No matter what, inn stays free. Yay!
Oh, you gotta choose a region it applies to, so it's not universal.
Oh, I know.
As far as spell casting, I would actually say bouncing spell, which is basically a case of that spell missed. Did it? And I see Bruno in the chat. We are in the closing phases. Good evening, man.
I think with me, it's going to be elemental penetration.
Mm-hmm.
Choose an element when casting a spell associated with the chosen element. The target's magical defense is penalized by your highest casting circle and given a bonus to equal to your highest casting circle when using the opposite element. Basically, if you choose holy and you cast a holy spell, the target's defenses are knocked down by your highest casting circle.
Mm-hmm. But in using elemental penetration, you are giving yourself a weakness. So if you were to use if you were to cast dark, you would have a harder time hitting.
And then we're on the subterfuge
Yep.
feats monk.
Mm-hmm. I would say cloaked casting.
Of course you would. Mine's gonna be feign death because I like to troll people.
Yep. Oh, and the point is that there's still a variety of feats that one can go with.
Mateus, I'd like to ask a clarification on your question. Do you mean favorite summons in the series or favorite summons in our game?
Mm-hmm.
Because we would like to keep the questions pretty specific to Legend Edition.
Yeah. And even when we did these summons, there were a bunch that we took out. And he says,
It's in Legend. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I see it.
So
So, you first, Monk.
I would.
Fellas,
Oh,
I have
Matt,
returned.
Matt's back at the very end of things.
I wasn't sure if you guys were still going or not.
Yeah.
And also no worries, Rihanna. Stay frosty.
Yep. Have a good time, Riona.
Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the summons in what we have, I'm actually gonna say Gilgamesh. I like what we did with Gilgamesh.
You fucking would.
I was gonna say either that or Knights of the Round because I like what we did with both of those cases.
God, what we did with Knights. Okay, so I actually have to open up the spell casting chapter for this one. Hold on for a minute and a fucking half.
Mm-hmm.
Blame the amount of spells the series has had over the years, people. And that's after we trimmed the fat that we have 165 pages in the spell casting chapter. After. Not before. God, down. Not down far enough. Down some more. Okay. So, what was done with Gilgamesh as a summon, the major actions and minor actions are very fun. The major action is an attack that attacks using your physical combat modifier and target's physical defense. Single target any row. Inflict elemental damage based on your weapon template. The element used is determined by rolling a d8 and consulting the following list. And so you get a weapon attack that can do a random element of damage. The minor action, Strongest Sword, it's an attack that attacks using physical combat modifier, targets physical defense, single target any row, inflicts damage based on your weapon template. If you rolled a critical success, treat the attack as if you had the triple critical feat. If you do not roll a critical success or critical failure, inflict normal weapon damage without your physical combat modifier or magical combat modifier, depending on weapon metatype. If you roll a critical failure, you instead strike the enemy with Excalibur, which inflicts 1 damage.
Not 1d4, just straight 1.
1 whole damage.
Yep. The yokai stuff is even more fun with Gilgamesh, but we won't get into that. The yokai stuff gets very involved, people.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we did with Knights of the Round, some pretty cool shit, such as you inflict quite a bit of fun extra effort mechanics using Knights of the Round as an eidolon. As a yokai, you actually have a sort of a different memento system or momentum system compared to other temporary resources within the system that eventually allows you to, do ultimate end to someone and fuck up their day. My favorite summon, if I have to choose, damn, it's a hard choice too. Probably. Probably. I have to go with Bahamut, just because it's fucking Bahamut. Come on now.
Yeah. I do
Yes,
remember I do remember somebody asking, would I do Neo Bahamut or Bahamut Zero? No.
And just so you all know, as a yokai of Bahamut, at the final circle in the chain of circles, in your 7th circle features, you get fucking Mega Flare. Like I said, turn into a dragon person that gets Mega Flare. Fuck you.
Yeah, you become Dion.
And an unwritten rule that we had when it came to the yokai tracks is the 7th circle ability is always their signature summon effect. Ifrit's 7th circle is Hellfire. Alexander's is Holy Judgment. Eden's is Eternal Breath.
Yeah, the 7th circle yokai stuff is named after their titular and iconic attacks as summons within the series. Dragon says, "Who doesn't love dragons? Soulless people. That's who." He's not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with all of that in mind, Monk, probably pretty good to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think this is as good a spot as any to wrap things up. Thank you.
At this point, we're just rambling.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming to the Q&A. I may end up doing a follow-up one of these simply because of the fact that thanks to Matt, we have a booth for this at Sage this fall. Sage, for those who don't know, is Sonic Amateur Games Expo. Started out as just Sonic fan games and expanded in the years since. And this does potentially mean that I may be on somebody's stream talking about the game, but it's going to be new territory for me because all that I have is the booth. I don't know who I would be talking with in regards to this. There is one final thing I do think I need to get out of the system before we wrap up, because this is a question I can see happening, especially given recent events. And that is whether or not the release of the Final Fantasy XIV TTRPG is going to cause any problems for us. The short answer is I do not believe it will. I don't even believe we're going to be in the same ballpark with each other. That one is a Japanese tabletop and has the mindset of a Japanese tabletop, which is already screwing people up, as I knew it would. And whereas we are doing a more agnostic approach that is using the entirety of the franchise. So because of that, it's going to be a case of apples and oranges.
On top of that, Square Enix is not actually known to be the most litigious video game company about stuff. You barely hear about any sort of ceases and desists sent by them.
If there was going to be a cease and desist about Final Fantasy TTRPGs, it would have been done many years ago.
Yep. And honestly, I don't think, especially since none of the fan games are going for money, because none of them are that stupid.
Mhm.
I don't think Square generally cares because then it's not a competing market.
And I don't see them trying to dive headfirst into the TTRPG business.
No, this is probably just a cool thing for them to try and see if it sticks.
Mm-hmm. But that is going to do it for this week. I've mentioned this before, but starting next month, with one exception, the Geek Watch episodes are going to be at 2 p.m. Central instead of 7. I'm not doing Geek Watch tonight because in a few hours I'm going to be watching Double or Nothing with some friends. And the schedule for the rest of this week it is the pinned comment on my Twitter profile. And while I'm at it, I'm going to make sure that it's also posted in the gates over on my Discord. All times are central. It is of course using a 24-hour clock, so adjust as needed. So I look forward to. And Mateus asked, "Do we have any date for the release?" We don't have a hard date. We're thinking late summer, early fall, at the rate that we're going.
Yeah, something like that. We'd like to have it done in time for Sage at the very least, so that's sort of like our spiritual deadline, but I think with the rate that we're going with everything, I think the only thing I can't really account for at all is like the art side of things, what JC's working on.
Mm-hmm. And JC's done some amazing work when it comes to the race and class art.
Seriously, it's gonna blow your minds. My mind was blown when I saw how much was done and the quality of the work. I'm just,
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be a sexy book.
Yeah, and right now the only thing that's left is the art for the independent tracks.
Yeah, and then other than that, I'm sure Zan has mentioned before that he's working on the rewrites, and then we just have a final, group proofread check, and then it's all layout work from there, and it'll be, I'll be working closely between myself and Nami to get that coordinated and get everything put together. But Nami's actually done a lot of the preliminary work, so I think when it comes to going through the layout and setting everything up, I think it's going to go a lot faster than you guys might think it will. And again, I've already been working on the bestiary, and that's already like a good 100 pages or so. I'm almost done. All I have left to do is type in some flavor descriptions, and that's another like good 100 pages of the book ready to go there. So I think when it's all said and done, when we get the writing finalized, I think it should be pretty smooth sailing from here on out. So I'm excited about that. I think we can get this out soon, but no concrete exact date yet. I don't want to make any promises that we can't keep.
Oh yeah. So that's what we got. If there's any further questions, you can easily find me on Twitter under Mildred the Monk, or you can ask questions in the tabletop section of my Discord, which is going to be in the description on this. And I look forward to what we've got coming down the pipe. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.